Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash was trapped in a snowstorm with May and they fell in love. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, the first flurry. The air was thin enough to burn, a knife's edge of cold that Ash Ketchum breathed in like a tonic. Below him, the crown tundra sprawled in a breathtaking, brutal tapestry of white snow, black rock, and the deep, glacial blue of frozen rivers. He stood on a narrow precipice, the wind a physical thing that tore at his jacket and threatened to scour the warmth from his bones. It was a violence he welcomed. It was real. Pikachu, perched on his usual spot on Ash's shoulder, was a compact ball of electric yellow defiance against the stark landscape. His ears twitched, scanning the horizon, his body thrumming with a low, constant energy that Ash could feel humming against his neck, a familiar and comforting vibration. On the wider ledge just below, Sceptile stood with an impossible stillness, 1 foot braced against an outcrop of obsidian-like rock, his arms crossed. The blades on his wrists were the color of new spring leaves, a vibrant splash of life in this monochromatic world of ice and stone. Higher still, circling in the unforgiving updrafts, Noivern's silhouette was a jagged tear in the pale sky. "All right, Noivern," Ash called out, his voice sharp and clear, cutting through the wind's mournful song. "Full sweep. I want a sonic map of the gorge, down to the riverbed." He didn't need to shout. The bond between them was a cord of light, a channel of intent that transcended mere words. He felt Noivern's affirmative cry echo not just in his ears, but in the center of his chest. The great bat-like Pokémon banked sharply, its massive ears swiveling like satellite dishes. A wave of inaudible sound pulsed from it, washing over the landscape, painting a picture in Ash's mind, a ghost image of the world rendered in vibration and return. It was a skill they had honed to perfection, a way of seeing without eyes. He felt the jagged contours of the cliffs, the deep scar of the gorge, the subtle shift in density that marked a snow-covered crevasse. "Path is clear for 2 clicks, Ash murmured, mostly to himself. "Then the gorge walls get unstable." "Sceptile, you're up." The forest Pokémon didn't need a second command. He launched himself from the ledge, a green blur against the snow. He didn't run, he flowed, his movements a perfect fusion of speed and power. He descended the treacherous slope in a controlled slide, his claws digging in for purchase, kicking up brilliant plumes of powder. A gnarled, ice-encrusted tree blocked the most direct path, a remnant of a more temperate age. "Cut it clean," Ash instructed, his eyes tracking the descent. Sceptile's arm was a flash of motion. A blade of pure, green energy, a leaf blade honed by 1,000 battles, shot out. It didn't just hack at the obstacle, it sliced through the petrified, frozen wood with surgical precision. The top half of the tree slid sideways and tumbled into the gorge, its fall a distant, muffled crunch. Sceptile landed where the tree had been, turning to look back up at Ash, his expression sharp and expectant. This was what it was about. Not the cheering crowds or the title of world monarch that felt more like a heavy cloak than a crown. It was this. The perfect, unspoken synchronization with his team. The challenge of a world that was still vast and untamed. The quiet hum of his own power, the aura that was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat, connecting him to everything, the cold, the rock, the Pokémon who were not his tools, but his family. It was a resonance, a feeling of being precisely where he was meant to be. He had spent the 2 years since his victory against Leon chasing this feeling. He'd fulfilled his duties, attended the galas, shaken the hands, and smiled for the cameras. He'd defended his title against challengers who fought with ferocious genius. But always, he was drawn back to the wild places of the world, the corners of the map that still held secrets. Here, there was no expectation, only existence. "Pika-Pi," Pikachu chirped, his head tilting. A new sound had entered their isolated world, carried on the shifting wind. It wasn't the cry of a wild Pokémon or the groan of shifting ice. It was a voice. Human. Singing. Ash focused, letting his senses expand. The voice was faint, a melody that rose and fell with a practiced grace, a stark contrast to the wind's raw howl. It was familiar. A warmth bloomed in his chest, a memory of red bandanas and a smile that could outshine the sun. It couldn't be. Not here. Not in one of the most remote and inhospitable regions in the world. He signaled to Sceptile to hold his position and began a careful, swift descent, his worn boots finding sure footing in the snow and ice. Pikachu clung tight, his own curiosity piqued. As they rounded a massive buttress of rock that shielded a small, sheltered plateau from the worst of the wind, he saw her. She was standing at the edge of the plateau, her back to him, looking out over the same gorge. The years had been kind, shaping the girl he remembered into a woman of striking confidence. Her hair, a rich brunette, was tied back in a practical ponytail, though a few errant strands whipped around her face in the wind. She wore a durable, insulated crimson jacket and dark pants, a stark figure of warmth against the endless white. In front of her, a Blaziken stood in a powerful martial arts stance, its fists wreathed in a controlled, shimmering heat that kept the immediate area blessedly free of the biting chill. Near a cluster of rocks, a Glacian was delicately pawing at a patch of ice, its crystalline fur sparkling. The song died on her lips as Blaziken shifted, its sharp senses detecting their approach. It turned, its movements fluid and ready, flames flaring slightly at its wrists. The woman turned with it, her hand dropping to the belt at her waist, a lifetime of training making her reaction instantaneous. Her eyes, the color of sapphires, widened. The guarded, ready posture melted away, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. A slow smile spread across her face, hesitant at first, then breaking wide like a sunrise. "No way," May breathed, her voice a mixture of laughter and disbelief. "Ash Ketchum? What in the world are you doing at the top of it?" The sound of his name from her lips was a key turning in a lock he hadn't known was rusted shut. The weight of the monarch title, the pressures, the loneliness of the summit, it all vanished in the warmth of that single, familiar smile. "May," he said, and his own grin felt wide and ridiculously boyish. "I was about to ask you the same thing. I thought you were in Johto for the grand festival." "Finished last month," she said, taking a few steps toward him, her boots crunching in the snow. Blaziken relaxed, giving a low, welcoming growl as Pikachu scrambled down from Ash's shoulder and bounded forward. "Pika Pikachu. Blaziken." The two Pokémon met in a flurry of excited chirps and growls, a reunion of old comrades. Pikachu scampered up Blaziken's leg and onto its shoulder, patting the fire-type's head in a gesture so familiar it made Ash's chest ache with nostalgia. "Looks like they haven't forgotten each other," May said, her eyes sparkling. She stopped a few feet from him, her gaze taking him in. He saw a flicker of something in her expression, respect, maybe even awe, as she looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't the same brash kid she traveled through Hoenn with. The years and the battles had carved a new stillness into him, a quiet confidence that sat deeper than bravado. He saw the same in her. The eager, sometimes uncertain rookie coordinator was gone, replaced by a poised and self-assured artist who commanded the landscape as if it were her stage. "Neither have we," Ash replied, the words feeling more significant than he intended. He gestured vaguely at the mountains. "I'm just training. Pushing the limits. Some things never change," she laughed, a bright, clear sound that the wind seemed to snatch away. "I'm scouting. Looking for inspiration. They say the appeals that win in the crown tundra are born from ice and fire. I wanted to see it for myself." She glanced at her Glacian, who was now curiously sniffing at Ash's leg. "It's beautiful up here, isn't it? In a terrifying, one wrong step and you're a history lesson sort of way." "That's the best kind of beautiful," he agreed. Sceptile had made his way up to the plateau, giving a nod of acknowledgement to Blaziken, a silent greeting between two apex fighters. Noivern chose that moment to descend, landing with a soft thud that shook the snow, folding his massive wings around himself. May's eyes went wide. Wow! He's incredible. He's a good friend, Ash said simply. He felt a familiar urge to deflect, to downplay. The world saw him as a champion, a figure of immense power. He just wanted to be Ash, especially with her. So, a contest inspired by all this? Something like that, she mused, her gaze drifting back to the gorge. I'm trying to capture the feeling of it. The silence, but also the power underneath. The way the ice seems to hold its breath. It's a difficult combination to express. They stood in a comfortable silence for a moment, two old friends reunited at the edge of the world. The years fell away, the easy camaraderie of their journey through Hoenn settling over them like a warm blanket. He remembered 100 moments like this, pausing on a dusty road, sharing a sunset, talking about dreams that had seemed impossibly distant then. Now, they were here, their dreams realized, and the connection was still just as effortless. It's really good to see you, May, he said, his voice softer now. She met his gaze, her sapphire eyes holding his. You too, Ash. More than you know. It was in that moment that the world shifted. The change was subtle at first. A drop in temperature so sudden it felt like a physical blow. The wind, which had been a constant, chaotic force, fell silent. An eerie, profound stillness descended upon the plateau. Every sound was abruptly muffled, as if a thick blanket of felt had been dropped over the mountains. Ash's aura flared, not with a burst of power, but with a sharp, cold prickle of warning, like ice needles against his skin. It was a feeling of wrongness. The air didn't just feel cold, it felt hungry. What was that? May asked, her head snapping up, her own finely honed instinct screaming that something was amiss. She hugged her arms to her chest, her breath pluming in a thick, white cloud that didn't immediately dissipate. Pikachu whispered, his fur standing on end, tiny sparks crackling nervously at his cheeks. Blaziken shifted, its flames burning brighter, a defiant shield of warmth against the encroaching chill. Something's coming, Ash said, his voice low and grim. He scanned the sky. The pale, overcast gray was darkening, churning with an unnatural speed. It wasn't the rolling, turbulent gray of a normal snow squall. This was a flat, dead, light-devouring blackness that spread from the horizon like a stain. And then the snow began to fall. It didn't drift. It didn't flurry. It fell in a thick, vertical, silent sheet, like a curtain being dropped. The flakes were large, complex, and unnaturally perfect, and where they landed, they didn't melt or settle. They clung, and the cold they brought with them was a deep, penetrating thing that went past the skin and into the bone. This isn't a normal storm, May stated, her voice tight with alarm. Her Glacian let out a distressed cry, a sound Ash had never heard from an ice type. It was reacting not to the cold, but to the nature of it. No, Ash agreed, his mind racing. The aura sense. That had been a warning prickle was now a constant, screaming alarm. The storm had an intent. A malevolent will. It was actively draining the energy from the air, from the very rocks around them. He could feel the warmth being leached from his body, a phantom chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. We have to get to cover. Now. He was no longer just Ash, the friend. In an instant, the calm, decisive commander that had won him the World Coronation Series took over. There was no panic in his voice, only absolute certainty. Noivern. Get above the snow line. Give me a sonic pulse, find the nearest deep cave or overhang. Anything that can shelter us. Noivern let out a powerful cry and launched himself upward, climbing hard against the oppressive weight of the air. May, call back Glacian. We need to stick close. Blaziken stays out. We'll need its heat. His commands were rapid fire, strategic. He was assessing the threat, formulating a plan, and acting all in the same breath. May didn't hesitate. She was a top-tier trainer in her own right, and she recognized the voice of a leader who knew exactly what he was doing. Glacian, return, she ordered, pulling a pokeball from her belt. A beam of red light shot out, recalling the distressed Pokémon. She moved to his side, her expression grim but focused. What about you? Sceptile, with me. Pikachu, stay close. Ash turned, his eyes scanning the terrain, trying to match what he was seeing with the faint, vibrational echo he was receiving from Noivern through their bond. The world was already a disorienting vortex of white. The snow was so thick it was like moving through water, visibility dropping to mere feet. The muffling effect was worse now, it felt like his ears were packed with cotton. A powerful sonic boom, felt more than heard, rolled through the ground. Noivern's report. Ash closed his eyes for a split second, processing the mental map. There. North-northeast. A deep fissure, almost a cavern, at the base of the main peak. Protected by a series of rock formations. This way, he yelled, his voice sounding strangely thin. He pointed into the blinding wall of white. There's a cave about a click from here. We have to move fast. He plunged into the storm, not with recklessness, but with a desperate, guided purpose. He couldn't see the path, but he could feel it, a faint thread of stability in the chaos, a route mapped in his mind's eye by Noivern's senses and his own aura's interpretation of them. Sceptile moved just ahead of him, a silent green guardian, using his claws to secure their footing on the increasingly treacherous, snow-covered ground. May was right behind him, her hand gripping the back of his jacket, a point of contact in the disorienting blizzard. Blaziken walked beside her, a walking furnace, its body heat creating a small, life-saving bubble of relative warmth around them. The Pokémon's flames, which normally burned with a vibrant yellow-orange, seemed dimmer, struggling against the unnatural cold that sought to extinguish them. The air, it feels heavy, May gasped, her breath coming in ragged puffs. It's hard to breathe. It's the storm, Ash gritted out, pushing forward. It's pulling the energy out of everything. Don't think about it. Just keep moving. One foot in front of the other. He was talking as much to himself as to her. He could feel the drain, a profound lethargy trying to seep into his limbs. It was a siren song of stillness, whispering promises of rest. To stop would be to freeze. To freeze would be to die. Pikachu, on his shoulder, let out a sharp cry of warning. Ash didn't even need to look. He felt it through his aura, a shift in the ground ahead. A crevasse. Hold, he commanded, throwing out an arm to stop May. Sceptile was already there, his feet planted at the edge of the hidden chasm, which was now made visible by a slight depression in the ceaseless snowfall. The path in his mind had shown a way around it, but the disorienting conditions made it impossible to judge distances. They were adrift in a sea of white. We have to go around, May said, her voice strained. No time, Ash countered. The cold was intensifying, a physical pressure. He could feel Blaziken's energy waning, its protective heat shrinking. We have to cross. Sceptile. He didn't need to finish the command. Bridge. The thought was a clear, sharp image sent through their bond. Sceptile crouched, his powerful legs bunching. He drove his hands into the frozen earth at the edge of the crevasse. With a guttural cry of exertion, he tore a massive, half-frozen tree root from the ground. It was as thick as a man's torso. In a feat of incredible strength, he heaved it up and shoved it across the gap. It landed with a heavy thud on the other side, forming a narrow, precarious bridge. Go. Ash urged May. Don't look down. She didn't argue. She trusted him. She moved onto the route, her balance sure and steady even in the gale, a testament to her coordinator's grace. Blaziken followed, its movements careful, its flames flaring in a desperate attempt to melt the treacherous ice coating the makeshift bridge. Ash went last, with Pikachu clinging to his hood and Sceptile falling in behind him. As he reached the halfway point, a sudden, violent gust of wind, colder and sharper than any before, slammed into them. The root groaned, shifting under his feet. He felt a moment of vertigo as the white abyss spun around him. A hand shot out and grabbed his arm, pulling him forward with surprising strength. It was May. She had turned back for him. Her grip was like a vice, her face set with grim determination. "I've got you," she yelled over the storm's roar. He found his footing, and together they scrambled the rest of the way across. They collapsed onto the solid ground of the other side, the wind tearing at them, the snow a blinding, suffocating torrent. Septile landed silently beside them. There was no time for relief. The lethargy was becoming a real danger. Ash felt his own movements growing sluggish. He forced himself to his feet, pulling May up with him. Almost there, he lied, hoping it was true. The cave had felt close, but in this white hell, distances were meaningless. He focused inward, pushing past the exhaustion, trying to find that faint vibrational map in his mind. There. A wall of rock. A dark space. A hollow. He staggered forward, May leaning against him for support, their combined strength barely enough to keep them upright. He could feel the life force of her Blaziken flickering like a guttering candle. The magnificent Pokemon was stumbling, its proud head bowed. "Blaziken, a little longer," May pleaded, her voice thick with worry. "Just a little longer." And then they ran into it. A solid wall of rock, appearing out of the white nothingness. Ash ran his gloved hands over it, the stone so cold it felt like it was burning him. His aura sense was screaming. This was it. The entrance was here. Septile. Find the opening. Septile moved along the rock face, his sharp eyes, far better adapted to seeing in low light, scanning for any break. After a few agonizingly long seconds, he gave a sharp cry and gestured with his head. It was barely a crack, a vertical slit in the rock face partially obscured by a curtain of frozen vines. It was narrow, but it was an entrance. "Get inside." Ash pushed May toward the opening. She squeezed through, and Blaziken, with a final, heroic effort, followed her, its body scraping against the stone. Septile slipped in after them. Ash was the last to enter, Pikachu tumbling from his shoulder onto the cave floor. As he stepped out of the wind, the change was instantaneous and profound. The roaring of the storm was reduced to a distant, mournful howl. The oppressive, energy-draining weight on his soul lifted. The air inside was still and frigid, but it was a natural cold, not the sentient malice of the blizzard. He slumped against the cave wall, his legs giving out. The adrenaline that had fueled their desperate flight evaporated, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion unlike any he had ever known. Around them, the cave was a deep, impenetrable black. A sudden, brilliant flash of light illuminated the space. May was standing in the center of the small antechamber, her hand on Blaziken's shoulder. The fire-type Pokemon, though visibly drained, had summoned a small, flickering flame in its palm. In its warm, dancing light, Ash could see the toll the ordeal had taken. May's face was pale, her lips tinged with blue, and her entire body was trembling from the cold. But her eyes were clear, focused, and alive. "We made it," she whispered, the words hanging in the still air. "Yeah," Ash breathed, pushing himself into a sitting position. "We made it." Pikachu staggered over and collapsed into his lap, a tiny, exhausted weight. Septile stood sentinel at the narrow entrance, a silent, unmoving guardian ensuring nothing followed them inside. "We need a fire," Ash said, his teeth chattering. "A real one. Blaziken can't keep that up forever." "I saw some dry moss and what looked like old firewood deeper in when Blaziken first lit the place up," May said, her voice already regaining some of its strength. She was already thinking, planning. Resourceful. Always. Together, they moved deeper into the cave. It opened up into a surprisingly large, circular cavern, the ceiling lost in the darkness above. True to May's word, a pile of what looked like ancient, dried-out wood and tinder was stacked against one wall, clearly the remains of some long-forgotten campsite. With a gentle command from May, Blaziken touched its fading flame to the tinder. It smoldered for a terrifying moment before catching. A tiny, fragile spark of orange grew, feeding on the dry moss, and then, with a soft whoosh, the larger logs caught fire. Warmth, real and life-giving, bloomed in the center of the cavern, pushing back the oppressive cold and the absolute darkness. The firelight threw their long, dancing shadows against the rough-hewn stone walls. Ash and May huddled close to the flames, their Pokémon gathering around them, a small island of life in a world of ice. Sceptile finally relaxed his vigil and joined them, settling near the fire's edge. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the distant, muted howl of the storm. Ash slowly, carefully, removed his snow-caked gloves and held his hands out to the flames, feeling the painful, prickling sensation of life returning to his numb fingers. He watched May do the same, her expression distant, her eyes reflecting the dancing fire. "That storm," she said finally, her voice quiet and haunted. "That wasn't natural, Ash. I've been through blizzards in Sinnoh, near Snow Point. Nothing like that. It felt angry." "I know," he said, his own voice a low rumble. "It was draining us. I could feel it. Like it was trying to pull the life right out of us." He looked at Blaziken, who was now resting, its own powerful life force slowly recovering in the fire's warmth. "If it weren't for Blaziken, we wouldn't have made it. If it weren't for you, we would have been frozen solid on that plateau," she countered, turning to look at him. The firelight softened the lines of her face, but he could see the bone-deep seriousness in her eyes. "How did you know where to go?" "You couldn't see a thing." Ash hesitated. He rarely spoke of his aura to anyone. It wasn't a secret, not really, but it was deeply personal. It wasn't a tool or a weapon, it was a part of him. But this was May. He could see the unspoken question in her eyes, the same trust she'd placed in him out in the storm. "It's hard to explain," he began, choosing his words carefully. "It's a feeling. A sense of things. Noivern's sonar gives me a picture, but the aura helps me navigate it. It lets me feel the right path. The safe one." She didn't look at him like he was crazy. She just nodded slowly, accepting it. "A sense of things," she repeated softly. "I think I understand. It's like when I'm in a contest. Sometimes, I just know the perfect moment for an appeal, the exact right combination. It's not something I think about, it's a feeling." "Yeah," he said, a small smile touching his lips. "Exactly like that." The easy quiet settled between them again, more comfortable this time. He pulled a few energy bars from his pack and handed one to her. They ate in silence, the simple act of replenishing their strength a small victory against the monstrous storm outside. The shared danger had stripped away the years, the titles, the distance. He wasn't the world monarch, and she wasn't a top coordinator. They were just Ash and May, huddled together in a cave, trying to survive. And it felt more right than anything had in a long, long time. "You're Sceptile," she said after a while, gesturing with her head toward the powerful Pokémon. "He's amazing. The way you two work together, it's like you're reading each other's minds." "It's a long road to get there," Ash admitted, glancing at his friend. "A lot of battles. A lot of trust." He looked back at her. "You and Blaziken, too. The way he protected us, the way he listens to you. That's not just training. That's family." A soft, genuine smile graced her lips. "He was my first partner. My first real friend on my journey." She looked into the fire, her expression nostalgic. "I was so clueless back then. I didn't even like Pokémon, remember?" Ash chuckled. "I remember you trying to ride your brand new bike through a forest and getting yelled at by my Pikachu. And I remember a certain trainer who was so obsessed with getting to the next gym he almost walked off a cliff," she retorted, a playful glint in her eye. I was 10, he protested, laughing. And it was a small cliff. Their laughter filled the cavern, a warm and welcome sound that felt like a shield against the cold. They spent the next hour trading stories, a cascade of memories from their time together, the disastrous Terracotta Town contest, the crazy battle against the giant clay doll, the time they got lost in the Mirage Kingdom. It was easy. It was natural. It was like no time had passed at all, yet everything had changed. He saw the strength she now carried so effortlessly, and he felt her seeing the same in him. As the fire burned lower, a comfortable warmth filled the cave. Their Pokémon were asleep, curled up in a heap of shared body heat. The exhaustion was returning, a heavy, comfortable weight this time. May yawned, pulling her knees to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. We should get some sleep, she murmured. Who knows how long we'll be stuck in here? You're right, Ash agreed. I'll take the first watch. We'll take it together for a bit, she said, not as a suggestion, but a statement. It's better than being alone with the sound of that wind. He nodded, grateful for the company. The howling outside seemed to have taken on a lower, more sinister tone, a guttural moan that vibrated through the stone. He added a few more logs to the fire, sending a shower of sparks into the darkness. I'm going to see how deep this cave goes, he said, getting to his feet. Make sure we're the only ones in here. Good idea, May said. I'll come with you. He broke off a piece of burning wood to use as a torch. The flickering light cast long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed as they walked deeper into the cavern. The air grew colder, the scent of damp earth and stone more pronounced. The main cavern narrowed into a tunnel, which eventually opened into a second, smaller chamber. It was a grim sight that met them. In the far corner of the chamber, slumped against the wall in a sitting position, was a figure. They were dressed in the tattered remains of modern, high-tech climbing gear, all of it covered in a thick layer of frost. It was a body, perfectly preserved by the deep, abiding cold of the cave. The person's face was obscured by a hood, but it was clear they had been here for a very, very long time. May gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ash instinctively stepped in front of her, holding the torch high, his other hand hovering near Pikachu, who had woken up and followed them, now growling low in his throat. It's all right, Ash said softly, though his own heart was pounding. They're long gone. He approached the body cautiously. There was no sense of danger from his aura, only a profound, lingering sadness. The person had not died violently. They had, it seemed, simply sat down and never gotten up again. Next to the body, half buried in the accumulated dust and frost, was a small, ruggedized data pad. Ash knelt down, his breath misting in the frigid air. With gentle reverence, he brushed the frost from the device. It was an old model, but built to last. He found the power button and pressed it, not expecting anything to happen. To his astonishment, the screen flickered to life, its light a pale, sickly green. The battery indicator was flashing a critical red, but it held. The screen displayed a single, corrupted text file. Most of the entries were just garbled symbols, but a few fragmented sentences were legible. May knelt beside him, her fear replaced by a somber curiosity. She leaned in, her shoulder brushing against his as they both tried to decipher the dying screen. Day 14. The storm does not end. It is not weather. It watches. A block of corrupted text followed, then another legible line. The cold is not an absence of heat. It is a presence. It thinks. It desires. The locals call it the heart of winter. They say it wants silence. The screen flickered violently. The heart of winter. May whispered, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Keep reading, Ash urged, his eyes locked on the screen. Another fragment appeared. The Aegis Order tried to contain it. Fools. They thought technology could cage a god. They saw the energy signature, but not the will behind it. They retreated. Left us. The final line of text was the clearest, and the most chilling. It seemed to have been typed with the last dregs of the author's strength. It whispers. It promises peace. The peace of the grave. A world preserved in ice, beautiful and silent forever. Don't listen. With a final, pathetic flicker, the screen went dark. The battery was dead. Ash and May remained kneeling in the oppressive silence of the back chamber, the torchlight casting a single, trembling pool of light around the frozen explorer and the dead datapad. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and cold as stone. The Aegis Order. The heart of winter. A world preserved in ice. The distant howl of the wind from the cave entrance no longer sounded like a storm. It sounded like a voice, whispering a promise of silence. They were not just trapped by a blizzard. They were at the epicenter of something ancient and terrible. And they were the only ones who knew. Ash looked from the dead explorer to May, whose face was a pale mask of dawning horror in the torchlight. Their eyes met, and in that shared glance, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Their struggle was no longer just for survival. It had just become something infinitely larger. Chapter 2, Echoes in the Ice. The silence in the back chamber was a physical weight. It was colder than the air, heavier than the stone. It was the silence of a life ended, a story cut short. Ash's torch cast a halo of trembling, golden light, a fragile defiance against the absolute black and the grim tableau before them. The dead datapad felt like a cold stone in his hand. Heart of winter. Aegis Order. A world preserved in ice. The phrases looped in his mind, stark and terrifying. May pushed herself to her feet, her movements stiff. She wrapped her arms around herself, not just from the cold, but as if to hold herself together. Her eyes were fixed on the frozen explorer, her expression a mixture of pity and horror. "We can't just leave him here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ash looked from the body to the narrow tunnel leading back to the relative warmth of the main cavern. "We're not," he said, his tone low but firm. "But we can't do anything for him right now. We need to get back to the fire. We need to think." His decisiveness cut through her shock, giving her a point of focus. She nodded, her gaze tearing away from the grim sight. She glanced at the datapad in his hand. "That thing. Ash, what if it's true? A sentient storm?" The explorer believed it. The cold we felt, the way it drained us, it wasn't normal. He pocketed the dead device. It was useless as a tool now, but as evidence, as a warning, it was priceless. "Come on." He led the way back, the torchlight preceding them like a scout. Pikachu trotted at his heels, his usual cheerful demeanor gone, replaced by a tense vigilance. The short walk back to the main cavern felt like a mile. The crackling of the fire was a welcome sound, a promise of life in the face of the dead stillness they had just left. Sceptile and Blaziken were awake, their heads raised, sensing their trainer's distress. Ash went straight to the fire, adding a few more logs, coaxing the flames higher. The renewed light and warmth felt like a physical shield. May sank down on the opposite side, her back to the wall, her knees drawn up to her chest. She stared into the flames, but her focus was 1,000 miles away. "They just left them," she murmured, her voice shaking with a quiet rage. "The Aegis Order. Whoever they are. They came, they investigated, and they just left these people to die." "They saw an energy signature, but not the will behind it," Ash quoted from the datapad, his voice grim. "They sound like they treat things like this as a problem to be contained, not a threat to be fought. People become acceptable losses." His hands clenched into fists. He had encountered that mentality before, in different forms. It was a cold, pragmatic logic that he had always despised, a way of thinking that stripped the heart out of a situation and left only numbers and risk assessments. He looked at May, at the way the firelight caught the troubled sheen in her sapphire eyes. The confident, brilliant coordinator he'd met on the plateau was still there, but now she was layered with a vulnerability and a fierce, protective anger that he recognized because he felt it too. He moved around the fire and sat down next to her, leaving a respectful but close distance between them. The stone was cold, but the shared space felt warm. "We're not going to leave anyone," he said, his voice a quiet promise. "We're going to figure out what this heart of winter is, and we're going to stop it." It was a monumental declaration, made in the heart of a cave, trapped by a supernatural storm, with no information and no allies. It should have sounded absurd. But coming from him, it sounded like a statement of fact. May turned her head to look at him, and for the first time since they'd left the back chamber, the deep-seated horror in her expression began to recede, replaced by a flicker of her usual resolve. "Just like that?" she asked, a faint, sad smile on her lips. "Take on the angry god of winter?" "We've faced worse," he said, and the simple, unadorned confidence in his voice was absolute. He wasn't bragging. He was remembering. Dialga and Palkia tearing space and time apart over Alamos Town. The world-eating tendrils of the corrupted tree of beginning. The cold, nihilistic ambition of Lysandra. He had stood against forces that threatened to unmake reality. This was different, more insidious, but the core principle was the same. You didn't run. You stood your ground. You fought for the people and Pokémon who couldn't. Her smile became a little more real. "Yeah," she breathed. "I guess we have." She shivered, a tremor that ran through her whole body. "It's still so cold." Without a second thought, Ash shrugged off his own insulated jacket. It was worn and familiar, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke in open air. He draped it over her shoulders. "Here." She looked up, surprised, her sapphire eyes wide in the firelight. "Ash, you'll freeze." "I run hot," he said with a half-smile. "Besides, you and Blaziken saved us out there. Call it payback." She didn't argue. She pulled the jacket tighter around her, sinking into its warmth. It was far too big for her, but she looked, right in it. Protected. The gesture was simple, practical, but it hung in the air between them, a quiet moment of care that went deeper than words. He could feel the tension in her shoulders relax just a fraction. "We need a plan," he said, turning his focus back to the problem. The monarch in him was taking over again, sorting chaos into objectives. "First, we survive. We ration the food we have. We keep the fire going. We rest. Our Pokémon are exhausted. We're exhausted. And then?" May asked, her voice clearer now, the strategist in her mind latching onto the structure he was building. "Then we learn. We can't be the only ones who know about this. The Explorer wasn't from 100 years ago. That datapad was old, but not ancient. The Aegis Order exists. There might be records, other outposts, something. The datapad mentioned locals. There must be a settlement nearby, maybe the one we saw on the map before the storm hit." "Freezing Ton," May supplied. "It was about 10 clicks east of here." "That's our goal," Ash decided. "We wait for a break in the storm, and we head for Freezing Ton. We find these locals and find out what they know about the heart of winter." It was a plan. A fragile, desperate plan, but it was a direction. It was a weapon against the suffocating helplessness of their situation. May nodded, her expression firming. "Okay. Okay, a plan. I can work with. A plan." She looked at their sleeping Pokémon, a protective softness in her eyes. "They need to recover." Blaziken pushed himself to the limit. "They all did," Ash agreed. "We'll take watches. 4 hours on, 4 hours off. You get some sleep first. You're shivering." "And you're not," she countered, but there was no real fight in her voice. She was exhausted. "I told you, I run hot," he repeated gently. "Get some rest, May." I'll wake you if anything changes. I promise. She hesitated for a moment longer, then gave a slow nod. She shifted, leaning her head back against the cave wall, pulling his jacket up to her chin. The firelight played across her face, and for a moment, Ash was struck by how little, and how much, she had changed. The determination, the kindness, it was all still there, but now it was tempered with a quiet strength, a self-possession that was captivating. Ash, she said, her voice soft and sleepy. Thanks. Anytime, he replied, his voice equally quiet. He watched as her breathing deepened, her eyes fluttering closed. Within minutes, she was asleep, her face finally peaceful in the flickering light. Ash settled in for the first watch. He sat cross-legged, facing the narrow entrance, his back to the fire. Pikachu, sensing his master's intent, climbed into his lap and curled up, a warm, electric weight. Sceptile, ever the sentinel, opened one yellow eye, gave Ash a slow, understanding nod, and then closed it again, sinking back into a light, watchful rest. The only sounds were the crackle of the flames and the muffled, incessant howl of the storm. The wind scraped against the rock outside, a hungry, searching sound. It was easy to imagine it as a living thing, pacing back and forth, waiting for them to emerge. It watches, the datapad had said. Ash didn't doubt it for a second. He let his senses expand, allowing his aura to brush against the boundaries of the cave. It was a familiar exercise, a form of meditation he'd practiced for years. He could feel the solid, unyielding life of the stone around him. He could feel the slow, deep slumber of his Pokémon, their life forces thrumming steadily. He could feel May's presence, a warmth behind him that was more than just body heat. And beyond the cave, he could feel it. The storm's presence was a vast, cold blanket of negative space. A void where energy should be. It was a psychic pressure, a deep, resonant note of profound sorrow and an even more profound desire for absolute stillness. It wasn't angry in the way a rampaging Pokémon was angry. It was the cold, patient, inexorable anger of a glacier. It had all the time in the world. He focused on his own center, reinforcing the core of warmth and life within him, a practiced defense against the psychic chill. This was what it meant to be the monarch. It wasn't just about winning battles. It was about being an anchor. A point of stability in a world of chaos. A protector. He had a duty to the world, yes, but right now, his world had shrunk to the confines of this cave. His duty was to the sleeping woman behind him and the Pokémon who trusted him with their lives. An hour passed. Then two. The fire burned steadily. The storm howled. Ash remained perfectly still, a silent guardian in the dark. Then, the quality of the sound from outside began to change. The low, guttural howl started to thin, rising in pitch. It became less a roar and more a whisper. A sibilant, insidious sound that seemed to snake its way through the crack in the stone. It wasn't just wind anymore. It was a voice. Or 1,000 voices, layered one on top of the other, all whispering the same words. Peace. Ash's eyes snapped open. Pikachu's ears flattened against his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Rest. The whisper was inside the cave now, seeming to emanate from the very air around them. It was a soothing, melodic sound, laced with an ancient, weary sadness. No more struggle, no more pain. The fire in the center of the cavern flickered violently, the flames turning a sickly blue-white. The temperature in the cave plummeted. It was the same unnatural, energy-leaching cold from the plateau. Ash could feel it pressing in, trying to find purchase in his soul. Only silence, beautiful, final, silence. He pushed himself to his feet, his movements fluid and silent. Pikachu leaped to his shoulder, cheeks sparking, his small body a tense coil of power. Sceptile. Blaziken. Up, Ash commanded, his voice a low, urgent whisper. It wasn't a shout, but it carried the immediate, undeniable weight of authority. The two powerful Pokémon were on their feet in an instant, shaking off the last vestiges of sleep. They formed a loose triangle, their backs to the sleeping May, facing the oppressive darkness of the cave. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and Ash felt a wave of profound weariness wash over him. A deep, tempting desire to just lie down, to close his eyes, to let the silence take him. He gritted his teeth, his aura flaring instinctively, a shield of raw life force that pushed the psychic suggestion away. It was an attack. Not on their bodies, but on their will to live. May, he said, his voice firm and clear, cutting through the insidious whispers. He reached back and gently shook her shoulder. Wake up. We have company. May's eyes flew open. She was disoriented for only a second before the unnatural cold and the whispering voices registered. She shot upright, grabbing the poke ball at her belt, her mind snapping from sleep to full alert. What is it? She asked, her voice tight. It found us, Ash said grimly. And then he saw it. The moisture condensing on the cold cave walls began to shimmer. Frost patterns, like the ones on a frozen windowpane, started to creep across the stone, but they weren't random. They were forming shapes. Skeletal, vaguely humanoid figures were tracing themselves in ice on the walls. What are they? May breathed, her hand going to her mouth. The frost patterns thickened, solidified, and then began to peel away from the rock. They were silent, their movements utterly unnatural. They weren't like living creatures. They were like puppets being animated by an unseen hand. They had no faces, just smooth, vaguely skull-shaped heads of ice. Their limbs were long and spindly, ending in sharp, crystalline claws. Ice wraiths. The first one detached itself completely from the wall and drifted silently toward them. It moved without a sound, its feet hovering an inch above the stone floor. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Ash's command was like a whip crack in the silent cave. A brilliant bolt of yellow lightning erupted from Pikachu's body, slamming into the ice wraith. The creature exploded, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards of ice that rained down on the floor. But 2 more were already peeling off the wall. And then 4 more. They were forming all around the cavern, their numbers growing with terrifying speed. They're forming from the frost. May shouted, her coordinator's mind instantly analyzing the situation. Blaziken, flamethrower. Aim for the walls. Dry them out. It was a brilliant tactical move. Blaziken opened its mouth and unleashed a torrent of fire, not at the wraiths, but in a wide arc across the damp stone walls. Steam hissed into the air as the intense heat vaporized the moisture, momentarily halting the creation of new wraiths in that section. But they were already outnumbered. A dozen of the silent monstrosities were advancing on them, their icy claws outstretched. We have to fight back to back. Ash yelled, moving to the center of the cave. Don't let them surround us. May was right there with him, her back pressing against his. Blaziken stood before her, fists wreathed in flame. Sceptile stood before Ash, the leafy blades on his wrists glowing with a faint green light. Pikachu was a mobile turret on Ash's shoulder, his senses scanning for threats. Sceptile, Leaf Blade. Go. Ash commanded. Sceptile became a green blur, darting into the encroaching ring of wraiths. He moved with a dancer's deadly grace, his glowing blades scything through the icy forms. He wasn't just breaking them, he was dismantling them, his cuts precise and devastating. 2 wraiths were reduced to piles of ice dust before they could even raise their claws. At the same time, May was issuing her own commands, her voice a sharp counterpoint to Ash's. Blaziken, Sky Uppercut on the one on the left. Blaziken shot forward, its fist cloaked in fire, and delivered a devastating uppercut to an advancing wraith. The creature was launched into the air, tumbling end over end toward the cavern roof. Now. Fire Spin. Blaziken leaped, twisting its body, and unleashed a vortex of flame that engulfed the airborne wraith. The temperature of the fire, concentrated in the spinning funnel, was immense. The ice wraith didn't just shatter, it sublimated, turning directly from solid ice to a cloud of steam with a high-pitched scream of tortured physics. It was a perfect, deadly combination. Art and battle fused into one. Ash felt a surge of admiration. This was the May who had dazzled the grand festival, but her artistry was now a weapon of terrifying efficiency. "Nice one," he yelled, a grin flashing across his face despite the danger. "Just getting warmed up," she shot back, her eyes alight with the fire of battle. The old rhythm was there, the synergy from 100 battles fought together in Hoenn. It was instinctive, immediate. He didn't have to worry about his flank, he knew she had it covered. He could focus completely on the enemy in front of him. But the wraiths were relentless. For every one they destroyed, another seemed to form, peeling away from a part of the wall Blaziken's flames hadn't reached. The cold was intensifying again, a palpable pressure that sought to slow their movements, to steal the heat from their Pokémon's attacks. Blaziken's flames were burning with a slightly less brilliant intensity. Sceptile's movements were a fraction of a second slower. One of the wraiths slipped past Sceptile's guard, its spindly arm shooting out, its clawed hand aimed directly at Ash's face. "Pikachu, Iron Tail." Pikachu flipped off Ash's shoulder, his tail glowing with a hard, metallic sheen. He spun in mid-air, slamming his tail into the wraith's arm with a loud crack. The ice shattered, but the momentum carried the creature forward. Before it could strike with its other hand, a blur of green intercepted it. Sceptile drove a leaf blade straight through the wraith's chest, and it disintegrated into a shower of ice. "Thanks, Sceptile," Ash said, his heart pounding. They were holding their own, but they were on the defensive. The battle was a stalemate, and in a battle of attrition against an enemy with seemingly limitless numbers and a will of absolute cold, a stalemate was a slow death. "Ash, this isn't working," May called out, her voice strained. "They just keep coming. And the more Blaziken uses his fire, the more it drains him in this cold." She was right. He could feel it. The tide was slowly turning against them. The initial adrenaline was wearing off, and the sheer, oppressive wrongness of their enemy was setting in. They didn't roar, they didn't bleed. They just came, silent and endless. Ash's mind raced, his strategic sense kicking into high gear. He closed his eyes for a barest fraction of a second, tuning out the chaos of the fight and tuning into his aura. He pushed his senses past the silent, advancing puppets. He was searching for the puppeteer. There. It wasn't a physical thing, but a concentration of the malevolent will. A focal point. In the back of the cavern, near the entrance to the second chamber where the explorer lay, the cold was thickest. It was a knot of psychic energy, a wellspring from which the wraiths were being animated. It was the heart of the attack, right here in their sanctuary. "May. The wraiths are just a distraction," he yelled, his eyes snapping open, his gaze fixed on the back of the cave. "There's a focal point, a concentration of its power. I have to destroy it." "How are you going to get through them?" she cried, as Blaziken kicked another wraith into pieces. "There's too many." A fierce, determined grin spread across Ash's face. "I'll need a path. Can you give me one?" May's eyes widened as she understood. He was trusting her to clear the way. To create an opening in this maelstrom of ice and silence. The pressure was immense, but she didn't flinch. A fire ignited in her eyes, a coordinator's brilliance meeting a warrior's resolve. "A path," she said, a confident smirk touching her lips. "I'll give you a grand stage. Blaziken. Get ready for the finale." Blaziken let out a powerful cry, its own fighting spirit resonating with hers. "Sceptile, cover them," Ash ordered. Sceptile moved to stand guard over May and Blaziken, a stoic green wall against the encroaching wraiths, his blades a blur of defensive cuts. May took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the battlefield. She wasn't just seeing monsters, she was seeing spacing, timing, rhythm. "Blaziken. Use Blaze Kick," straight up the middle. Create a line. Blaziken's leg ignited in a column of spiraling fire. The Pokémon charged forward, not at a single wraith, but down the center of the cavern, carving a straight line through the advancing horde. He didn't stop, spinning like a top, his flaming legs scything through ice and silence. Wraiths shattered left and right, their fragments hissing as they were vaporized by the intense heat. He carved a fiery corridor through the enemy ranks, stopping just short of the back wall. Now, Blaziken. May commanded, her voice ringing with power and artistry. The appeal. Overheat. It was a risky move. Overheat was immensely powerful, but it sharply lowered the user's special attack afterward. It was a finishing move, a final, brilliant flash. Blaziken braced itself, its body glowing with an almost unbearable intensity. It wasn't just its flames, its very being seemed to be on fire. It threw its head back and unleashed a wave of incandescent, white-hot fire. It wasn't a stream, it was a dome, an expanding nova of pure heat that erupted from its body. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Every wraith caught within the blast radius, dozens of them, was obliterated. They didn't shatter. They didn't melt. They were erased, turned to steam in a microsecond. The wave of heat washed over the entire cavern, and for a glorious moment, the bone-chilling cold was banished, replaced by the dry, blistering heat of a desert sun. The whispering voices screamed, a discordant shriek of psychic agony, and then fell silent. The path to the back of the cave was utterly clear. Blaziken stood panting in the center of the devastation, steam rising from its body, its power spent. May swayed on her feet, the tactical and emotional exertion of the move taking its toll. But her eyes were fixed on Ash, shining with triumph and trust. "Your stage is ready, Monarch," she called out, a breathless, triumphant cry. Ash didn't waste the opportunity. It was the single most breathtaking and devastatingly effective move he had ever seen. "Pikachu, let's go." He sprinted down the path Blaziken had cleared, his feet pounding on the stone floor. Pikachu was a ball of electric fury on his shoulder. As he ran, he focused his aura, gathering the warmth and life force within him. The cold was already starting to creep back in from the focal point, a tangible wave of despair and stillness. He could see it now, a patch of rock near the tunnel entrance that was covered in a thick, black, crystalline ice that seemed to swallow the firelight. It pulsed with a faint, dark energy. That was the heart of the infestation. He felt the psychic pressure slam into him, a direct, targeted attack on his mind. Rest. It is easier. Surrender. Never. Ash roared, not just with his voice, but with his spirit. He threw up a shield of pure aura, a shimmering blue wave of energy that met the invisible psychic assault and held it at bay. The effort made his head pound, but he pushed through it. He skidded to a halt a few feet from the pulsing black ice. Pikachu. Full power. End this. Volt tackle. Pikachu. Pikachu launched himself from Ash's shoulder, his entire body enveloped in a blinding aura of golden electricity. He became a living thunderbolt, a missile of pure life and energy aimed at the heart of the cold and silence. He slammed into the black ice with the force of an explosion. The sound was not a crack, but a deafening boom of displaced reality. A shockwave of blue and gold energy erupted from the point of impact, washing over the cavern. A high-frequency scream tore through the air, a sound of pure will being shattered. The black ice spiderwebbed with incandescent cracks, and then imploded, collapsing in on itself and vanishing, leaving behind only a scorched patch of normal stone. The unnatural cold in the cavern vanished instantly. The oppressive psychic pressure disappeared. The fire, which had been struggling, roared back to its full height, its flames a vibrant, healthy orange. Silence. A true, natural silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the ragged, heavy breathing of the cavern's occupants. The ice wraiths that had been outside Blaziken's overheat radius simply stopped. Their forms went rigid, And then, with a soft, collective sigh, they crumbled into piles of inert, powdery snow. It was over. Pikachu landed on the ground, Sparks still dancing harmlessly in his fur, and staggered over to Ash's leg, leaning against it, utterly spent. Sceptile finally lowered his blades, the green glow fading. Blaziken slumped to its knees, its own energy reserves completely depleted. Ash stood panting, his head throbbing from the effort of shielding his mind. The adrenaline that had flooded his system crashed, and a wave of exhaustion so profound it made his knees buckle hit him. He stumbled, his vision swimming. A pair of strong, steady hands caught him before he could fall. May was there, her face pale and smudged with soot, but her eyes were blazing. She held on to his arms, supporting him. "Easy, Ash. I've got you." He leaned on her, grateful for the support. "Did we get it?" he breathed. "We got it," she confirmed, her voice soft. "You did it." "We did it," he corrected, looking at her. Her face was only inches from his. He could see the exhaustion etched around her eyes, but also the fierce, unyielding strength that had created the opening he needed. The shared danger, the perfect synergy, the absolute trust, it had forged something new in the heart of the battle. The easy camaraderie of their friendship had been pressure-tested and reforged into something harder, brighter. More precious. They stood there for a long moment, supporting each other in the silent, firelit cavern, surrounded by their exhausted Pokémon and the snowy remains of their foes. The immediate threat was gone, but the knowledge of what they were facing remained. And then, as if to remind them, a new voice filled the space. It was not the layered, sibilant whisper from before. This was a single voice, calm, clear, and filled with a sorrow so deep it felt as ancient as the mountain itself. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, resonating not in their ears, but directly in their minds. Why? The single word was not a question of tactics. It was a question of motive. A plea for understanding. Ash and May instinctively moved closer together, a united front against this new, more intimate intrusion. You fight so hard. You struggle. You burn so brightly, only to exhaust yourselves. For what? A few more moments of pain. A few more breaths of struggle. All life is a cycle of hope and despair. A chaotic, pointless flame that ultimately consumes itself. The voice was not angry. It was heartbreakingly rational, the logic of a being that had watched for eons and come to a terrible conclusion. Ash found his voice, his own will, a defiant spark against the voice's crushing melancholy. Life isn't pointless. The struggle, the fight, that's what gives it meaning. Our connections, our friends, that's what we fight for. Connections break, the voice replied, its tone gentle, patient, as if explaining a simple truth to a child. Friends are lost. Love fades into memory and pain. I have seen it 1,000,000,000 times. Every spark of joy inevitably casts a shadow of grief. I offer an end to that. A final, perfect peace. A world where nothing can ever be lost, because nothing can ever change. A beautiful, silent stillness. You're talking about a world of statues. A museum. May shot back, her voice ringing with passion. There's no beauty in that. Beauty is in the performance, the movement, the feeling. A rose is beautiful because it blooms, not because it's frozen in a block of ice. There was a long pause. The presence behind the voice seemed to be considering her words, tasting their unfamiliar flavor. Feeling is the source of all conflict, it finally said, its sorrow deepening. But you are interesting. You burn with a fire I have not felt in many ages. A monarch of vibrant life, and an artist of defiant passion. Your bond, it resonates with a painful warmth. The voice began to fade, the psychic presence withdrawing like a slow tide. Rest now, little flames. The blizzard will pass, for a time. But know this. I have seen you. I have tested you. And now, I know what I must do to bring you peace. The true peace you do not yet understand you crave. I will find you again. The voice was gone. The presence vanished from their minds. They were alone again. Ash and May stood in the center of the cavern, the weight of that final promise settling over them. They had won the battle. They had survived the test. But in doing so, they had painted a target on their backs. They looked at each other, the same grim understanding reflected in their eyes. They were no longer just lost in a storm. They were being hunted. Chapter 3, The Frozen Town and the Hunter. The silence left behind by the voice was heavier than the one before it. It was a silence filled with intent, a promise of future conflict. Ash stood in the center of the fire-lit cavern, May's steadying hand still on his arms. The warmth of her touch was a stark contrast to the memory of the voice's soul-deep chill. He could still feel the phantom echo of it in his mind, a gentle, sorrowful logic that was more terrifying than any monstrous roar. He finally drew a deep, ragged breath, the air blessedly free of the psychic pressure. "You okay?" he asked, his gaze searching May's face. She gave a shaky nod, withdrawing her hands as he found his balance. "I think so." That voice, it was like listening to a song that makes you want to cry, but you don't know why. She hugged herself, his jacket still draped over her shoulders. A world without pain because there's no feeling left. That's not peace. It's a nightmare. It's an ideology, Ash said grimly, his mind already working, processing the encounter. And it's the most dangerous kind, one born from a twisted sort of compassion. It thinks it's saving us. He looked over at their Pokémon. Blaziken was being helped to its feet by Sceptile, the two powerful creatures sharing a moment of quiet, mutual respect. Pikachu was already nibbling on a spare energy bar Ash had dropped, his resilience as boundless as ever. They had won, but the cost was clear. Their energy reserves were critically low. It said the blizzard would pass, May recalled, her voice gaining a sliver of hope. For a time. It's toying with us, Ash deduced, walking over to the narrow cave entrance. He peered through the crack. The vertical torrent of snow had ceased. The wind's howl was just that again, wind, not a chorus of whispers. A pale, ethereal light was beginning to filter through the clouds. It's giving us a rope, wanting to see if we'll hang ourselves with it. It wants to know what we'll do next. So what do we do? May asked, coming to stand beside him. Exactly what we planned, he said, his voice hard with resolve. We rest, we recover, and we head for Freezing Ton. The voice confirmed what the datapad said. It's a being with a history. People know about it. We need that knowledge. He looked at their dwindling pile of supplies. They had maybe a day's worth of food left. And we need supplies. We can't fight a god on an empty stomach. His practicality was an anchor in the storm of supernatural horror. May felt a smile touch her lips, a real one this time. Some things really don't ever change, do they? He grinned back, a flash of the old, familiar Ash. Hey, a monarch has to eat. They spent the next few hours in a state of watchful recovery. They portioned out their remaining food, sharing a meager meal with their Pokémon. May, with a practiced and gentle hand, tended to Blaziken, using a potion from her pack to soothe the strain of its overheat. Ash sat with Pikachu and Sceptile, talking to them in low, reassuring tones, the bond between them a tangible thing that seemed to help restore their spirit as much as any medicine. The atmosphere in the cave was different now. The easy nostalgia was gone, replaced by the quiet, focused intensity of two veterans preparing for the next phase of a campaign. They were a team, forged not by a league or a festival, but by the shared crucible of the storm. When their Pokémon were settled and resting, Ash took the dead explorer's datapad from his pocket. Aegis Order, he said, turning the inert device over in his hands. The name sounds official. Military, almost. They have to be a government unit, May reasoned, her brow furrowed in thought. Or a private one with a lot of funding. That explorer's gear was top of the line, even for a few years ago. And they were investigating energy signatures. That means advanced tech. She paused, her expression darkening. And they retreated, leaving people behind. That means they have a protocol. A cold one. They see someone like me, someone with aura, as an unregistered variable, Ash mused, a dangerous edge to his voice. Just another energy signature to be contained. They're not going to see us as allies. So we have two enemies, May stated flatly. A sorrowful god who wants to freeze the world, and a clandestine army that wants to lock up anyone who could stop it. Sounds like a Tuesday, Ash quipped, the dark humor a necessary release. May snorted a laugh, shaking her head. You're impossible. Gets the job done, he replied. After a few more hours, with the light outside growing stronger, he made the call. All right. Time to move. The storm's given us a window. We have to take it. They packed their few belongings in silence, the mood grim but determined. Ash helped May into her own jacket, taking his back. The fabric was still warm from her, and for a fleeting moment, the simple intimacy of the exchange cut through the tension. Their eyes met, and an unspoken acknowledgement passed between them. I've got your back. With Septile taking point and Blaziken, now steady on its feet, guarding the rear, they squeezed out of the narrow cave entrance and back into the crown tundra. The world was transformed. The landscape was covered in a thick, pristine blanket of snow, but it was unlike any snow Ash had ever seen. It was unnaturally smooth, almost sculpted. The wind had carved it into soft, flowing dunes, but there were no tracks, no signs of life, nothing to mar its perfect, white canvas. The air was deathly still and held a biting, crystalline cold, but the oppressive, energy-draining malevolence was gone. It was just a place, beautiful and terrible in its silence. Above, the clouds were a high, thin sheet of white, the sun a pale, hazy disk that offered light but no warmth. It's like the whole world is holding its breath, May whispered, her voice awed and unsettled. It's a tomb, Ash said, his voice low. A beautiful one. He scanned the horizon, his years of traveling the wilds giving him an innate sense of direction. Freezing Ton is that way. He pointed towards a distant gap between two lesser peaks. Let's move carefully. Stick to the ridges where we can. The snow could be hiding anything. The journey was arduous. The snow was deep, and each step was a conscious effort. They moved in silence, conserving their energy, their senses on high alert. Ash led the way, his aura a constant, low-level probe, feeling out the terrain beneath the deceptive snow, warning him of hidden ice patches and deep drifts. May walked close behind, her eyes scanning their surroundings, her coordinator's sharp perception noticing things Ash's battle-focused senses might miss, the strange, perfect fractal patterns in the frost on the rocks, the way the sound of their footsteps was unnaturally muffled. After nearly 2 hours of grueling trekking, they crested a high ridge, and Ash stopped dead. By the gods, May breathed, coming to a halt beside him. Below them, nestled in a small, sheltered valley, was Freezing Ton. It was exactly as it had appeared on the map, a cluster of sturdy, stone and timber houses, a small marketplace, a Pokemon center with its iconic red roof. But it was all wrong. The entire town was encased in a shell of shimmering, translucent ice. It wasn't a clumsy burial. It was a work of art, a horrifying masterpiece of preservation. The ice was perfectly clear, capturing the town in a single, stopped moment. Ash could see a curl of smoke rising from a chimney, frozen solid halfway into the air. He could see a woman at a market stall, her hand outstretched to offer a Castelia cone to a customer, their smiles locked forever in the ice. He could see a group of children in the middle of a snowball fight, their laughter and motion caught and held in crystalline suspension, a silent, joyful tragedy. A deliveryman was polishing the front window of a shop, the cloth and his expression of concentration flawlessly preserved. It was Silas's promise made manifest. A world without pain. A world without life. Beautiful. Silent. Final. The sheer, awful scale of it hit Ash like a physical blow. This wasn't a story anymore. It wasn't a whisper in a cave. This was real. These were people. Families. Lives, extinguished in an instant of terrible, merciful beauty. A cold, hard rage began to build in his chest, a clean, pure fire against the memory of the voice's sorrow. May made a small, choked sound beside him. He saw tears tracking paths down her cold-reddened cheeks. She wasn't looking at the whole scene, but at one small house with a yard. A man was on one knee, holding a poke ball out to a small, nervous-looking EV. The EV's ears were back, but its tail was giving a tentative wag. A new partnership, a new journey, frozen at the very moment of its inception. He wanted to give them peace, May whispered, her voice thick with revulsion. He calls this peace. Ash didn't answer. He put a hand on her shoulder, a simple, grounding gesture. His own anger was a roaring furnace, but it was controlled, focused. It was fuel. He channeled it, his gaze sweeping the frozen town, looking for any sign of a flaw, any break in the perfection. And he found one. In the center of the town, near what looked like a small shrine, one building was different. It wasn't encased in the same clear, perfect ice. It was surrounded by a faint, shimmering dome of milky, opalescent light. The ice had flowed up to the edge of the dome and stopped, unable to penetrate it. There was a faint layer of normal frost on the windows, but the building itself was untouched. There, Ash said, his voice tight. He pointed. Someone's alive. Hope, fierce and desperate, cut through the horror. They started down the slope, their caution forgotten in their haste. They entered the town's silent streets, their boots crunching on the frozen ground. It was an experience from a nightmare. To walk among so many people, all of them so close, so full of life in their frozen poses, yet utterly gone. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, no distant chatter. Only the sound of their own breathing and the pounding of their own hearts. They reached the shielded building. It was an old house, built from dark, ancient-looking stone, with strange, intricate symbols carved into the lintel above the door. The shimmering dome of light pulsed faintly as they approached. Ash reached out a hand and touched it. It was warm, and it hummed with a quiet, steady power. It felt old. It was a form of aura, he realized, but a different dialect. A passive, protective ward woven into the very stones of the house. He knocked on the heavy wooden door. The sound was shockingly loud in the dead silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, they heard the sound of multiple bolts being drawn back. The door creaked open a few inches, and a pair of wary, ancient eyes peered out. They belonged to a man so old he seemed to be made of little more than wrinkled parchment and bone. He was wrapped in thick furs, and his long, white beard was braided with small, carved stones. "Who are you?" the old man rasped, his voice like stones grinding together. "More of the metal men, come back to watch us die." "Metal men?" May repeated, confused. "He means the Aegis Order," Ash said, his eyes meeting the old man's. He kept his posture open, non-threatening. "We're not with them. We were trapped by the storm. We're looking for answers." The old man's gaze was sharp, piercing. He looked from Ash to May, then to Pikachu on Ash's shoulder. His eyes lingered on Ash for a long time, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. You burn," the old man wheezed, his gaze fixed on Ash's chest. Faintly. "But you have the fire of the living. Not the cold." Calculation of the metal men. He seemed to make a decision. The door creaked open wider. "Come in. Before your warmth draws his attention." They stepped inside. The interior of the house was a single, large room, cluttered with books, scrolls, and strange artifacts. A fire pit in the center glowed with warm embers, and the air was thick with the scent of dried herbs and wood smoke. It was a pocket of life in a town of death. "I am Elian," the old man said, bolting the door behind them. "The lore-keeper of this place. Or what's left of it. I'm Ash. This is May." Ash gestured to the shimmering light visible through the window. "How did you protect this place?" "These runes," Elian said, gesturing to the symbols carved into the walls, the same as the one above the door. "They were placed by my ancestors. They don't fight the cold. They sing the song of life, of warmth, of change. It is a frequency he can no longer bear to hear. It holds his peace at bay." He shuffled over to the fire and sank onto a low stool. "It will not last forever." "You mean the heart of winter?" May asked, stepping closer to the fire, her hands outstretched to the warmth. Elian's ancient eyes filled with a profound sadness. "So you have heard his name. We do not call him that anymore. We call him Silas. The grieving guardian." "Guardian?" Ash asked, his brows knitting together. "He's destroying everything." "He did not always," the old man said, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a storyteller. "Long ago, before the first kings of Galar, Silas was a being of immense power, a protector of this land. Not a Pokemon, but something other. A spirit of the world itself. He felt the joy of every new life, and the pain of every death. He rejoiced in the cycles of summer and winter, life and decay. But mortals, you are a loud, clashing species. Your wars, your hatreds, your brief, passionate lives that burn out so painfully, it was a constant chorus of grief in his mind. He bore it for millennia. But something broke him. A great war, generations ago, that stained this tundra red. He saw so much suffering, so much pointless loss, that his heart, the heart of winter, finally froze. He came to believe that the only way to end the suffering was to end the cycle. To offer a final, perfect stillness. The story resonated with the sorrowful voice they had heard in the cave. It wasn't a monster. It was a broken savior. "The Aegis Order," Ash said, bringing the conversation back to the present. "You called them the Metal Men. They were here." Elian spat into the fire. The spittle sizzled on the embers. "They came a week ago. Men in gray armor, with machines that hummed and Pokemon that moved with cold precision. They did not speak to us. They set up their devices, took their readings. They said the energy output was reaching a critical, world-ending threshold. They tried to erect some sort of technological barrier to contain it. It failed, shattered by Silas's will. They packed their machines." The old man's voice dropped to a low, venomous growl. "They looked at our town, at the people who had lived here for generations. And they classified it. Acceptable loss in a prime-level event. They retreated to a more defensible position to observe and re-evaluate. They left us to die." The cold, hard confirmation of their worst fears settled in the small house. May looked physically ill. Ash's jaw was set like granite. "So this Aegis Order," Ash said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Their goal isn't to save people. It's to contain threats. No matter the cost. They are men who believe they can put the gods themselves in a cage," Elian sneered. "They fear what they cannot control. And they will fear you, Ash Ketchum." Ash's head snapped up. "How do you know my name?" The lorekeeper's ancient eyes seemed to look right through him. "I am a lorekeeper. I feel the currents of the world. A new monarch has been crowned. A boy with a fire in his heart and a bond with the Stormbringer of the skies and the Thunder Mouse at his side. The stories travel on the wind. I did not expect to meet you at the end of the world." He gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "It seems the legends have a flair for the dramatic." Before Ash could respond, Pikachu's ears shot up. A sharp, urgent Pika cut through the air. Sceptile, who had been resting near the door, rose to his full height, his gaze fixed on the entrance. Blaziken let out a low growl. "What is it?" May asked, her hand going to her belt. "Company," Ash said, his own senses flaring. It wasn't Silas. This was different. Technology. Multiple life signs, both human and Pokemon, surrounding the house. Elian's face grew grim. "The metal men. They've come back." A voice, amplified by a speaker, boomed from outside, shaking the very timbers of the house. "Occupants of the structure. You are harboring an unregistered, prime-level threat. Exit the building with your hands raised. Failure to comply will be met with decisive force." Ash looked at May, then at the old man. "Stay here. Keep the shield up." "What are you going to do?" May asked, her eyes wide with alarm. "I'm going to have a talk with them," Ash said, his expression hardening. He walked to the door. "They will not talk," Elian warned. "They will shoot. Then they'll be making a big mistake," Ash said simply. He unbolted the door and stepped outside. The scene was one of cold, military precision. A dozen soldiers in sleek, gray combat armor had formed a perimeter around the house. They held strange-looking rifles, and alongside each of them stood a Pokemon, Magnezone, Bronzong, Metagross, all types known for their resilience and tactical utility. They moved as one, a seamless unit of man and machine. A man stood at the front of the formation, his armor slightly different, marked with the chevrons of a lieutenant. He was young, his face sharp and serious, his eyes cold and analytical. "This must be Kale." "Ash Ketchum," Kale said, his voice the same one from the speaker, now without the amplification. "World Monarch. You are a Class 7 bioenergetic entity, operating outside designated parameters at the epicenter of a prime-level catastrophe. By the authority of the Aegis Accord, you are to surrender yourself and your Pokemon for immediate containment and debriefing." Ash stood on the porch, his hands loose at his sides. He projected an aura of absolute calm. "I'm not the one you should be worried about. There's a being called Silas that just turned this whole town into an ice sculpture. He's your prime-level threat. I'm trying to stop him. Your presence correlates with the anomaly's intensification," Kale stated flatly, as if reading from a report. "You are a variable in an unstable equation. All variables must be controlled. This is your final warning." "And this is yours," Ash countered, his voice dropping, losing its warmth, replaced by the steel of a champion who had faced down. "Gods! Get out of my way. Let me do my job. Or I'll move you myself." Kale's expression didn't change. He simply gave a curt nod to his soldiers. "Subdue him." It was not a chaotic attack. It was a symphony of tactical aggression. Two Magnezone rose into the air, their bodies humming. They didn't fire a discharge. Instead, they projected a shimmering field of energy that washed over Ash. His aura sputtered. It felt like being plunged into static, the connection to his own power suddenly muffled and indistinct. Sonic dampeners. Simultaneously, two soldiers fired their rifles. They didn't shoot bullets. They launched nets of glowing, blue energy that flew through the air, designed to entangle and incapacitate. Ash didn't flinch. Sceptile. Pikachu. He didn't need to say more. Sceptile was a blur of motion, launching from the doorway. He was so fast he seemed to be in 3 places at once. His leaf blades flashed, not with energy, but with the cold, hard steel of his physical arms. He sliced through both energy nets in mid-air, the severed halves falling harmlessly to the ground. Pikachu leaped onto the porch railing. "Pikachu, quick attack. Take out the Magnezones." Pikachu became a streak of yellow light, moving with impossible speed. He zipped up the wall of the house, launched himself off the roof, and slammed into the first magnezone before it could react. He then ricocheted off it, hitting the second one from the side. He didn't use an electric attack, he knew they'd absorb it. It was pure speed and physical force, disorienting them and disrupting their dampening field. The static in Ash's mind cleared. His aura flared back to life. Kale was unfazed. Metagross units, engaged the Sceptile. Bronzong, psychic on the Pikachu. Fire teams, suppression pattern. 2 Metagross thundered forward, their massive bodies shaking the ground. They met Sceptile's charge with a meteor mash, a clash of green energy and blue steel that sent shockwaves through the frozen street. The soldiers began firing their energy nets in a coordinated pattern, trying to box Ash in. May appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Blaziken was at her side. "They're trying to separate them," she yelled to Ash. "Their formation is too tight. Then we break it." Ash yelled back. He met her eyes, a silent question passing between them. "Trust me." Her determined nod was his answer. "May, have Blaziken use flamethrower." "Not at them. At the ground in front of them." She didn't question the strange command. "Blaziken, do it." Blaziken unleashed a powerful jet of fire that superheated the ice-covered street in front of the Aegis soldiers. The ice didn't just melt, it flash-boiled, exploding into a massive, thick cloud of steam and mist that instantly engulfed the entire area, plunging the battlefield into chaos. Visibility dropped to 0. The Aegis soldiers' precise formation was broken. Shouts of confusion erupted from the mist. "Now!" Ash commanded. He plunged into the steam cloud, his aura giving him a perfect, three-dimensional map of where every soldier and Pokémon was. He moved through the chaos like a phantom. He emerged behind a soldier, his hand chopping down on the man's neck in a precise, non-lethal blow. The soldier crumpled. He sidestepped a blind swing from a Bronzong and placed a hand on its metal side. He didn't push it. He channeled a tiny, focused pulse of aura into it, just enough to disrupt its psychic focus. The Pokémon wobbled, its attack fizzling. He was a ghost in the machine, dismantling the Aegis unit from the inside out without throwing a single punch. It was a display of control so absolute it was terrifying. Kale, his senses screaming, spun around in the mist. "Target the source of the aura. Converge on my position." Too late. Ash was already there, moving through the thinning steam like a specter. He appeared directly in front of Kale. The lieutenant reacted with superb training, raising his rifle to fire a point-blank energy net. Ash didn't even bother to dodge. He simply raised a hand. A shield of pure, blue aura flared to life, and the net dissolved against it with a harmless sizzle. Kale's eyes widened in shock. His technology was useless. He dropped the rifle and drew a combat knife, his Pokémon, a sleek and powerful Bisharp, moving to stand with him. "Stay back," Ash warned, his voice calm. Kale lunged, his knife arcing towards Ash's throat. Ash sidestepped the attack with effortless grace. He didn't strike back. He simply moved, flowing around Kale's furious, precise attacks, letting the lieutenant exhaust himself. It wasn't a fight, it was a lesson. Finally, as Kale lunged again, overextending himself, Ash's hand shot out. He didn't grab the knife. He grabbed Kale's wrist. He squeezed, and the lieutenant cried out, the knife clattering to the frozen ground. With a simple, irresistible twist, Ash spun Kale around and pinned him against the wall of the house. Kale's Bisharp moved to strike, its arm blades gleaming. "Sceptile," Ash said, not even looking. A green blur intercepted the Bisharp. Sceptile didn't attack. He simply appeared in its path, one arm catching the Bisharp's blade, the other resting gently on its chest, a silent, undeniable checkmate. The Bisharp froze, recognizing the utter superiority of its opponent. The steam cleared completely. Kale's entire squad was down. Not dead, not seriously injured, but incapacitated, their Pokémon disoriented. Ash had single-handedly, and almost non-violently, dismantled a highly trained, technologically advanced military unit in under a minute. He held Kale pinned to the wall, his calm, powerful gaze locked on the lieutenant's furious, disbelieving eyes. "My fight isn't with you," Ash said, his voice low and intense. "The thing that did this to the town is still out there. It's a threat to the whole world, not just this tundra. Now, are you going to keep wasting my time, or are you going to get your people and get out of my way?" Kale stared at him, panting, his tactical mind struggling to process what had just happened. He had come here to contain a variable. He had found a force of nature. This wasn't just a trainer. This was something else entirely. The sheer, controlled power, the moral clarity, it defied all his training, all his protocols. With a growl of frustration, Kale finally broke eye contact. He slumped against the wall in defeat. "Fall back," he bit out, his voice choked with humiliation. "All units, fall back." Ash released him. Kale stumbled, catching himself. He didn't look at Ash. He began issuing orders, his voice clipped and professional again, as his soldiers slowly picked themselves up. He retrieved his rifle, then paused and looked back at Ash, new, grudging respect warring with his anger. "This isn't over, Ketchum," he said. "I'm reporting this. My commander will hear about your power level. He will see you as an even greater threat." "Tell him," Ash replied, his gaze unwavering. "Tell him he can either help me save the world, or he can be the obstacle I have to get through to do it. The choice is his." Kale stared at him for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the frozen streets with the last of his retreating soldiers. Ash stood alone, the silence of the town rushing back in. May came out of the house, her face a mask of awe. "Ash. I've never seen you fight like that." "I don't like to," he said, the hard edge leaving his voice. He looked around at the frozen town, at the silent, permanent tragedies. The anger was still there, a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He was now a fugitive, hunted by a powerful human faction. But that didn't matter. All that mattered were the faces in the ice. "Let's see what the Lorekeeper has for us," he said, his voice heavy. "We're running out of time." They were no longer just survivors. They were rebels. Fugitives. And the only hope for a world that was being lulled into a beautiful, silent, endless sleep. Chapter 4. A warmth in the cold. The heavy wooden door of the Lorekeeper's house closed with a final, resonant thud, shutting out the dead silence of freezing ton. The immediate aftermath of the battle hung in the air, a strange mix of residual adrenaline and somber reality. Elian, the old man, was standing by the fire pit, his ancient eyes fixed on Ash with an expression that was no longer just wary, but deeply, profoundly astonished. You did not fight them," he wheezed, his voice filled with disbelief. "You unmade them." Ash ran a hand through his hair, the tension from the confrontation slowly seeping out of him. "They weren't the enemy. Just an obstacle." He walked over to the fire, the warmth a welcome relief. The fight had been short, but the mental and physical control it had required was draining. May came to his side, her own awe slowly giving way to a pressing concern. "They'll be back, Ash. That Lieutenant, Kale, he wasn't just retreating. He was re-evaluating. He'll report to his commander, and they'll come back with more. Enough to level this whole valley if they have to." "I know," Ash said, his gaze fixed on the glowing embers. "That's why we can't be here when they return." He looked at Elian. "You said Silas was a guardian. That legends knew him. There must be a way to reach him. To reason with him, or, to fight him." Elian nodded slowly, shuffling over to a large, dusty chest in the corner of the room. "My ancestors were not just lore keepers. They were part of a lineage tasked with watching over Silas. They were the ones who tried to soothe his grief, to remind him of the warmth of life. They failed. He heaved the heavy lid of the chest open, the scent of old parchment and dried herbs filling the air. But they left records. Prophecies. A path. He rummaged inside, his bony fingers dancing over scrolls and bundled herbs, before pulling out a large, rolled-up map made of some kind of cured hide. He spread it out on a low table, the surface cracked and faded with age. It depicted the crown tundra, but in a style that was more art than geography. Mountains were drawn as sleeping giants, rivers as silver serpents. "This is the old map," Elian explained, his finger tracing a path. "It shows the ley lines of the land, the currents of its life force. My shield," he gestured to the shimmering dome outside, "is built on a confluence of these lines. A place of warmth and life." He then tapped a spot high in the mountains, a peak drawn with a crown of jagged spires. "And this is the crown shrine. The place where the barrier between the physical world and the spirit world is thinnest. It is where Silas's power is most concentrated. It is the heart of winter." The crown shrine, Ash repeated, the name resonating with a sense of finality. That was their destination. The source. "You cannot go there directly," Elian warned. "The storm is weakest now, but it will return, and its full fury will be focused on that peak. To approach it is to walk into the center of his sorrow. He will unmake you before you take 100 steps." The old man's finger slid down from the peak, to a spot deep within a cluster of mountains marked with a symbol of steam. "But there is another way. A path through the mountain's heart. A place the cold cannot touch. The old legends call it the Hearth of the Guardian. May leaned closer, her eyes tracing the lines on the map. "A geothermal cavern." "More than that," Elian said, a hint of reverence in his voice. "A sanctuary. A place where a different kind of guardian sleeps. A being of fire and water, of steam and pressure. The ancient texts speak of a Vulcanian, bound to the mountain's core. Its presence creates a pocket of warmth, a secret oasis of life deep beneath the ice. The tunnels that lead from it are old, but they are said to emerge near the base of the crown shrine, bypassing the worst of the storm's fury. A dormant Vulcanian." Ash's mind raced. A legendary Pokémon of immense power, right underneath them. It was a risk, but it was their only viable path. "How do we find this hearth?" Elian looked at Ash, his gaze intense. "The map will only get you so far. The entrance is hidden, shielded by ancient wards. Only one with the fire of life, one who can feel the warmth of the world's heart, can find it. Your aura, boy. It is your compass." He then pointed to a small symbol on the map, near the hearth's location. It was a series of concentric circles, intersected by a sharp, angular line. "And be warned. You are not the first to seek this path." Ash recognized the symbol immediately. It was a modern addition to the ancient map, drawn in stark, black ink. He'd seen it stenciled on Aegis Order equipment. "The metal men have been there," Elian confirmed, seeing the recognition in Ash's eyes. "They seek to control the ley lines. To control the guardians. They know of the hearth, but they could not enter. They lack the key." He tapped Ash's chest. "The key you carry within you." The pieces were clicking into place. The Aegis Order wasn't just hunting him. They were in a cold war with beings like Silas, trying to seize control of the world's supernatural focal points. The hearth, and the Vulcanian within it, was a strategic prize of immense value. "We need to go," Ash said, his decision made. "Now." Kale's commander, Valerius, won't wait long. He had overheard the name in the soldiers' scattered communications in the mist. Elian nodded. He quickly gathered a leather satchel, filling it with small bundles of dried rations, herbs, and a water skin. "This is all I can spare. It will not be much, but it is more than you have." He pressed the satchel into May's hands. "Go. And may the spirits of your ancestors guide you." "What about you?" May asked, her voice laced with concern. You can't stay here. The Aegis order will come back, and your shield, my shield will fail, Elien finished, his expression calm, accepting. And I will join my people in the ice. I am the lore keeper. My place is here. My story ends with my town. He gave them a thin, sad smile. Go write a better ending for the world. There was no arguing with the finality in his voice. Ash met the old man's gaze and gave a deep, respectful bow. Thank you, Elien. For everything. Do not thank me, the lore keeper rasped. Succeed. With a final, somber look at the old man, they left the House of Living History and stepped back into the frozen silence. They didn't look back. They couldn't. They followed the directions from Elien's map, moving swiftly through the silent, accusatory streets and out of the valley, climbing back into the high, desolate tundra. The journey to the supposed location of the hearth was even more grueling than the trek to Freezing Tun. The terrain grew steeper, the wind sharper. The pale sun began its descent, painting the endless snow in shades of violet and rose. The beauty of it was haunting, a poignant spectacle in a dying world. They moved in silence, the weight of Elien's sacrifice and the frozen faces of the townsfolk heavy on their hearts. Ash pushed them hard, his senses on high alert for any sign of the returning storm or an Aegis patrol. But his primary focus was inward. He was searching, as Elien had instructed. He let his aura flow out of him, not as a probe, but as a net, feeling for the subtle warmth the old man had described. For hours, he felt nothing but the deep, abiding cold of the rock and ice. Dusk was deepening into a frigid twilight when May finally stumbled, her breath catching in a sob of pure exhaustion. Ash, I need a minute. He stopped instantly, turning to her. Her face was pale, her lips chapped, and her whole body was trembling, a combination of cold and fatigue. He saw the proud, determined set of her jaw, the way she was trying to fight it, and his heart ached. He had been so focused on the mission, on the next objective, that he had pushed them both to the breaking point. You're right. I'm sorry, he said, his voice softer than she had heard it in a long time. He scanned their surroundings. They were in a small, sheltered bowl of rock, a temporary reprieve from the wind. We'll rest here. Just for a bit. He helped her to a flat, snow-dusted rock and sat her down. He pulled the last of their energy bars from his pack and handed her one. She took it, her gloved fingers fumbling with the wrapper. He gently took it from her, tore it open, and handed it back. A simple gesture, but the look of gratitude in her exhausted eyes spoke volumes. He sat down beside her, the silence stretching between them. Their Pokémon, equally exhausted, huddled together for warmth nearby. I'm not used to this, May admitted, her voice quiet. The cold. The hopelessness of it all. In a contest, even if you're losing, there's always a chance for a comeback. A brilliant appeal, a last-minute combination. There's always hope. But this, she gestured to the vast, empty, frozen landscape around them. This just feels final. Ash watched her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. He understood. The pressure of the world on his shoulders was a familiar weight, but he rarely shared it. He was the anchor, the one who was supposed to be unshakable. But looking at May, at her honesty and her vulnerability, he felt a crack in his own carefully constructed armor. I know what you mean, he said, his voice a low murmur. When I became monarch, everyone started looking at me differently. Like I was supposed to have all the answers. Like I couldn't fail. He let out a short, humorless laugh. The truth is, half the time I'm just making it up as I go along. I just trust my instincts. I trust my Pokémon. He paused, then looked at her. And I trust the people I'm with. Her eyes met his, and in the deep purple twilight, there was a profound sense of connection. The titles, monarch, coordinator, had fallen away completely. They were just two people, lost and scared, leaning on each other at the end of the world. Sometimes I feel so, alone up there, Ash admitted, the words coming out before he could stop them. It was a confession he hadn't made to anyone, not even his mother. The loneliness of the summit, the isolation of being the strongest. Everyone expects you to be a symbol. It's hard to just be. Ash. May's expression softened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. She reached out, her gloved hand resting on his arm. I know. After I won the grand festival, everyone wanted a piece of me. Sponsors, interviews, rivals who saw me as a target, not a person. They all saw the Princess of Hoenn. No one saw the girl who was still sometimes scared she'd trip on stage. She gave his arm a gentle squeeze. But I always saw you, Ash. Even when you were on that huge stage, fighting Leon. I saw the same kid who got excited about a new kind of donut. The same one who would risk everything for a Pokemon he'd just met. Her words were a balm to a wound he hadn't known was so raw. He looked at her, at the genuine warmth and understanding in her sapphire eyes, and he felt a profound sense of coming home. She saw him. Not the monarch. Not the champion. Just him. And in that moment, he felt it. A low, resonant hum, not in his ears, but in his bones. It was a feeling of deep, foundational warmth, pulsing up from the ground beneath them. It was the ley line. The hearth. His head snapped up, his eyes wide. It's here, he breathed. We're right on top of it. He stood, his exhaustion vanishing, replaced by a surge of energy. He closed his eyes, focusing his aura, following the thread of warmth. It led him to a sheer wall of rock at the back of the sheltered bowl. It looked solid, unremarkable. The entrance is here, he said with absolute certainty. May was on her feet, her own fatigue forgotten. But there's nothing there. Elian said it was shielded, Ash recalled. That only the fire of life could open it. He placed his palm flat against the cold stone. He didn't try to force it. He didn't push. He simply opened himself. He let the feelings of the last few hours flow through him, the anger at Silas, the sorrow for the frozen town, the camaraderie with his Pokemon. And most of all, the deep, abiding warmth he felt for the woman standing beside him. The connection, the trust, the feeling of being truly seen. He focused on that warmth, that spark of life and hope in the face of the endless cold. He poured it into his aura, a silent, heartfelt appeal to the ancient wards. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint, golden light began to trace itself across the rock face under his hand. Intricate, glowing lines, like the runes in Elian's house, spread out from his palm, forming a large, circular pattern. The rock in the center of the circle began to shimmer, turning translucent, then intangible. A low grinding sound echoed as a section of the stone wall slid away, revealing a dark, cavernous opening from which a gentle, warm, steam-filled breeze flowed out. It smelled of wet earth and deep, volcanic heat. He had done it. You are, incredible, May whispered, staring at the glowing, open doorway. Ash turned to her, a slow, tired smile on his face. He felt drained, but triumphant. No, he said, his gaze holding hers. We are. He led the way into the tunnel. The moment they stepped inside, the oppressive cold of the tundra vanished, replaced by a humid, balmy warmth. The stone doorway slid silently shut behind them, the golden runes fading, plunging them into darkness. Blaziken, a little light? May asked. A small, soft flame ignited in Blaziken's palm, illuminating the tunnel. It was a natural lava tube, its walls smooth and dark. The air was thick with steam, but it was breathable, life-giving. They followed the tunnel as it sloped gently downwards. The further they went, the warmer it became. After a few minutes of walking, the narrow tunnel opened up into a cavern of breathtaking scale. It was a vast, subterranean world. The ceiling was so high it was lost in the steam-filled darkness. The cavern was filled with a lush, impossible jungle of glowing moss, strange, phosphorescent fungi, and prehistoric-looking ferns, all thriving in the humid warmth. A series of interconnected hot springs fed a large, placid lake in the center of the cavern, its water a stunning, geothermal blue. Waterfalls of warm water cascaded down the rock faces, their sound a gentle, constant roar that was the polar opposite of the storm's howl. The entire cavern was lit by the soft, multicolored glow of the bioluminescent flora, casting the whole scene in an ethereal, magical light. This was the hearth of the Guardian. A secret, living world hidden beneath the ice. "It's beautiful," May breathed, her voice filled with wonder. For the first time since the storm had hit, they were truly safe. No wind, no cold, no whispering voices. Just the warmth, the gentle sound of water, and the soft glow of life. The tension of the last few days finally broke. Ash felt his shoulders, which had been knotted with stress, finally relax. May let out a long, shaky breath she seemed to have been holding since freezing ton. Their Pokémon, sensing the absolute safety of the place, began to explore, their weary bodies immediately soothed by the warm, damp air. Pikachu scampered over to one of the hot springs, cautiously dipping a paw in, then chirping in delight at the warmth. They found a dry, mossy bank near the central lake and collapsed, shedding their heavy outer layers. The simple act of taking off his jacket felt like shedding a suit of armor. Ash lay back on the soft, springy moss, staring up at the glowing patterns on the unseen ceiling, and just breathed. May settled beside him, her Pokémon, Glaceon and Blaziken, curling up near her. She had released Glaceon, knowing the ice type would be safe from the unnatural cold here. They didn't speak for a long time, just absorbing the peace of the sanctuary. It was May who finally broke the silence, her voice soft and thoughtful. "In the cave, you said you felt alone." Ash turned his head to look at her. In the soft, blue-green light of the glowing moss, she looked like a creature of myth, her sapphire eyes seeming to hold the light of the cavern within them. "Yeah," he admitted, his voice quiet. "I did." "You're not," she said simply. She shifted, moving a little closer. The space between them was no longer one of camaraderie, but of a quiet, building intimacy. "You have your Pokémon. You have your mom, Professor Oak, all your friends back home. It's not the same," he tried to explain. "They're proud of me. But they don't understand. They can't. What it's like to stand across from someone like Leon, with the whole world watching, and feel the weight of all that power. Or what it's like to feel something like Silas, something that wants to unmake everything." He looked away, staring at the glowing lake. "It's a different world. And it's lonely there." She was quiet for a moment. I think I understand a little," she said softly. "When I perform, there's a moment. The lights are on you, the crowd is silent, and it's just you, your Pokémon, and the judges. And in that moment, you're completely alone. Everything you've worked for, everything you are, it all comes down to that single, perfect appeal. And no one else can feel that pressure for you." He looked back at her, surprised by the comparison, but understanding it completely. "Yeah. It's exactly like that." She offered him a small, empathetic smile. "Maybe we're not so different, Monarch." A comfortable silence fell again, but it was charged with unspoken things. The events of the last few days had stripped them down to their essential selves. There were no masks, no titles. Just Ash and May. He was acutely aware of her proximity, the warmth radiating from her, the soft sound of her breathing. He remembered the feeling of her hand on his arm, the trust in her eyes when she'd created a path for him in the cave, the way she had held him up after the fight with Kale. He realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that the warmth he had focused on to open the door, it wasn't just gratitude or friendship. It was something more. Something that had been buried for years under the weight of their separate lives and ambitions, now unearthed by the pressure of their shared ordeal. "May," he began, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't know what he was going to say. He only knew he had to say something. She turned her head fully towards him, her expression open, waiting. He pushed himself up onto one elbow, bringing his face closer to hers. He saw her breath catch, her eyes widen slightly. The air crackled between them, more potent than any of Pikachu's attacks. "Out there, on the mountain," he said, his voice low and rough with emotion. "When I was trying to open the door." Elian said to focus on the fire of life. On warmth. He hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. "I wasn't thinking about the sun, or a bonfire." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin was soft, warm. "I was thinking of you." The confession hung in the warm, humid air. Her eyes searched his, and he saw a cascade of emotions in their sapphire depths, surprise, recognition, and a dawning, brilliant hope. She didn't speak. Instead, she leaned in, closing the small distance between them. Her lips met his in a kiss that was soft, hesitant, and yet held the weight of a decade of shared history. It wasn't a kiss of sudden, fiery passion. It was a kiss of quiet, inevitable recognition. A feeling of finding a missing piece of himself he hadn't even known was gone. It was a beginning, and it was a homecoming. When they finally broke apart, they rested their foreheads together, their breath mingling in the glowing air. "I was so scared," she whispered, a confession of her own. "When that first ice wraith appeared. And then, when those Aegis soldiers attacked. But the most scared I've been was when you were facing them all alone. But I knew. I knew you'd be okay. I've always known that about you." "I wasn't alone," he murmured, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "I had you." They had fallen in love. Maybe they had been for years, and they were just now realizing it. Or maybe love was something that could be forged in the heart of a supernatural snowstorm, a single point of warmth against a world of cold. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that it was real. Here, in this hidden sanctuary, it was the only thing that felt real. As they settled back onto the moss, not apart, but together, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest, Ash noticed something on the far wall of the cavern. In the dim light, he saw carvings. Ancient murals, stretching across the stone. Curiosity piqued, he and May stood and walked closer, their hands instinctively finding each other's. The murals were vast and incredibly detailed. They depicted a cycle. The first panel showed a figure of immense sorrow, made of ice, Silas, unleashing a blizzard upon the world. The next showed figures wreathed in blue light, Aura Guardians, fighting back the cold with fire and Pokemon. The cycle repeated, again and again, a battle fought across generations. But then, Ash saw a newer set of markings, overlapping the ancient ones. They were modern, precise, and chillingly familiar. Aegis Order markings. They weren't just scrawled on the walls, they were schematics. They depicted the ley lines of the cavern, the location of the sleeping Volcanion, and detailed plans for something called a null field emitter. It was a device designed to sever a being's connection to its power source. To cage the Volcanion. To neutralize the hearth itself. The Aegis Order didn't just want to control this place. They wanted to lobotomize it. And the murals confirmed Ash's deepest fear. The final, horrifying image was a tactical diagram. It showed the Heart of Winter and an Aura Guardian, both designated as prime threats. The Aegis objective, written in cold, stark lettering, was clear: let threats neutralize each other. Contain the victor. End the cycle. They weren't just being hunted. They were being used. They were pawns in the Aegis Order's long game to sterilize the world of any power they couldn't control. Ash's hand tightened around May's. Their newfound warmth, their fragile moment of peace, was set against a backdrop of a cold, calculating war on two fronts. Their love wasn't just a personal revelation. In a world threatened by both a sorrowful God and a ruthless human order, it had just become their most important anchor. It was their own private hearth, a fire they would have to guard with everything they had. Chapter 5, The Siege of the Sanctuary. The soft, multicolored glow of the hearth, which moments before had felt like a benediction, now seemed to cast long, predatory shadows. The Aegis Order schematics scrawled over the ancient murals were a brutal violation, a modern blasphemy on a sacred text. Let threats neutralize each other. Contain the victor. End the cycle. The words echoed in Ash's mind, a cold, tactical declaration of war against everything he stood for. They were never going to help, May said, her voice a low, furious whisper. She traced the diagram of the null field emitter with a trembling finger. They'd let Silas freeze half the continent, as long as it meant he'd weaken you enough for them to what? Put you in a box. A cage, Ash corrected, his own voice dangerously calm. The initial shock was already hardening into a cold, diamond-sharp resolve. They don't see a difference between Silas's power and mine. It's all just uncontrolled energy to them. A threat to their order. He squeezed her hand, a grounding gesture in the face of the chilling revelation. This place, the Vulcanian, it's not just a path for us. It's a power source they want to claim or sterilize. The fragile peace of their sanctuary was shattered. It was no longer a haven, but a strategic position they had to defend. The warmth on his skin was now juxtaposed with the icy reality of their situation. They were trapped between a god of sorrow and a clinical, human machine that saw them both as cancerous growths on the world. A low, resonant rumble vibrated through the stone floor, shaking the placid water of the geothermal lake. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a deep, guttural sound, like a furnace igniting in the heart of the mountain. The Vulcanian, Ash breathed, his aura flaring, sensing the immense, sleeping power stirring below them. It's reacting to something. As if on cue, a new sound intruded upon the gentle roar of the waterfalls. It was a high-frequency, mechanical whine, emanating from the tunnel they had entered through. It grew in intensity, a dentist's drill against the soul, setting their teeth on edge. Their Pokémon, who had been resting peacefully, were instantly on their feet, growling and chirping in alarm. They found us, May stated, her hand instinctively going to the pokeballs at her belt. But how? The entrance was sealed. They didn't need to find the entrance if they could make their own, Ash said, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the tunnel. They have the technology. They must have been tracking us, waiting for us to lead them here. The whining sound reached a crescendo, and then, with a deafening boom, the section of the lava tube that formed their entrance exploded inward. Rock, steam, and shrapnel flew into the cavern. A new, perfectly circular tunnel, 5 times the diameter of the original, had been bored through the mountain, its edges glowing with residual heat. From the darkness of the new tunnel, figures emerged. Aegis Order soldiers, clad in their sleek gray armor, poured into the cavern, fanning out with chilling, practiced efficiency. They were followed by larger, more imposing figures, heavy infantry in exosuits, their armor plated and thick. And with them came their Pokémon, squads of Magnezone, Bronzong, and a new addition, hulking, bipedal Rhyperior, their drills spinning menacingly. At the head of the invasion force, a man stepped into the ethereal light of the hearth. He was older than Kale, with a stern, powerful face framed by close-cropped silver hair. His armor was a darker shade of gray, adorned with command insignias. There was no hot-headed anger in his eyes, only a cold, analytical intelligence. He surveyed the cavern, his gaze sweeping over the glowing flora, the geothermal lake, and finally, settling on Ash and May. This was Commander Valerius. Ash Ketchum, Valerius's voice boomed, amplified by his helmet but carrying a natural, commanding tone. Your ability to locate and access sites of significant anomalous energy is remarkable. You have saved us considerable time and resources. He gestured to the cavern around them. This entire geothermal system, and the prime-level mythical Pokémon at its core, is now under the jurisdiction of the Aegis Order. Surrender, and you may yet have a role to play in the new, stable world we are building. His words were not a threat, they were an offer of employment. A demotion from hero to tool. A stable world built on cages and acceptable losses. Ash shot back, stepping forward, his body shielding May. Pikachu leaped to his shoulder, a low growl rumbling in his chest, cheeks sparking with defiance. No, thanks. We have our own plans. Valerius's expression didn't flicker. He had expected this. So be it. He raised a hand, and the high-frequency whine they had heard earlier returned, this time from emitters being set up by soldiers around the newly bored entrance. Lieutenant Kale's report indicated your aura sensitivity is your primary strategic asset. Let's see how you fare without it. The whine intensified, and a wave of psychic static washed over Ash. It was far more powerful than what Kale's squad had used. The world, which he perceived through a symphony of aura, suddenly became muffled, indistinct. The connection to his Pokémon felt strained, the vibrant life force of the hearth dimmed to a faint echo. It was like fighting with cotton in his ears and Vaseline on his eyes. It's a sonic disruption field. May yelled, her coordinator's mind quickly analyzing the technology. It's interfering with your frequency. Ash, can you fight? I can adapt, he gritted out, the effort to focus his senses causing a sharp pain behind his eyes. He could still feel, but the signals were weak, corrupted. He was fighting half-blind. Contain them, Valerius ordered calmly. Priority 1 is to secure the geothermal lake and begin deployment of the null field emitter. Do not permanently damage the subjects unless absolutely necessary. They are valuable assets. The siege began. It was not a chaotic battle like the one against the Wraiths. It was a cold, calculated military operation. The heavy infantry and their Rhyperior formed a solid front line, a wall of armor and rock advancing steadily. Behind them, the Magnezone and Bronzong provided ranged support. Sceptile, Leaf Blade. Pikachu, Electroweb. Ash commanded, his voice strained from the effort of pushing his intent through the static. Sceptile shot forward, a green streak against the glowing moss, aiming for the gaps in the Aegis line. But they were prepared. Two Rhyperior slammed their fists into the ground, triggering Rock Wrecker. Massive boulders, torn from the cavern floor, flew through the air, forcing Sceptile to break off his attack and dodge. Pikachu leaped into the air, spinning and launching a net of electricity aimed at the advancing soldiers. A Bronzong floated forward, its body glowing with a psychic shield. The Electroweb fizzled harmlessly against it. They've analyzed our fighting styles. Ash realized with a jolt. Kale's report, they've adapted. They're countering our every move. They were being systematically boxed in, pushed back towards the geothermal lake. The Aegis forces moved with the inexorable logic of a rising tide. My turn, May said, her voice cutting through the chaos with a sharp, clear confidence. She stepped up beside Ash, her eyes blazing. This was her stage now, and she saw the rhythm, the flow of the battle, that Ash, with his senses disrupted, could not. Ash, they're not fighting us, they're hurting us, she said, her tactical assessment rapid and brilliant. Their formation is strong at the front, but their support line is exposed. They're all focused on you. They're underestimating me. A fierce, predatory smile touched her lips. They think I'm just a pretty face in a contest hall. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. The synergy between them was instantaneous. He didn't need his aura to understand what she was planning. He trusted her. What's the move? You're the distraction. Keep that front line busy. Draw their fire. I'll take care of the support. She put 2 fingers to her lips and let out a sharp, piercing whistle, a signal she had used in 100 contests. From the lush, fern-filled jungle near the side of the cavern, a new figure emerged. It was a Beautifly, its wings a dazzling mosaic of color, and behind it, a wartortle, its expression mischievous and ready. She had released them when they first arrived, letting them enjoy the sanctuary. Now, they were her secret weapons. Blaziken. Use the terrain. Hot springs. May commanded. Blaziken, seeming to understand her intent perfectly, didn't charge the front line. It leaped, its powerful legs carrying it in a high arc over the advancing Rhyperior, and landed directly in one of the shallow, steaming hot springs that dotted the cavern floor. Valerius's eyes widened slightly. A fire type in water? It was an illogical move. Now. Blaze kick, in the water. May ordered. Blaziken thrust its flaming foot down into the geothermal water. The effect was explosive. A massive eruption of superheated steam and boiling water shot upwards and outwards, directly into the faces of the frontline soldiers and their Rhyperior. The soldiers cried out in pain and confusion as the scalding spray hit the gaps in their armor. The Rhyperior roared, their rocky hides protecting them from the heat, but their vision was completely obscured by the thick, rolling cloud of steam. The Aegis front line was momentarily broken, their advance stalled in chaos. Ash, now! May yelled. It was the opening he needed. Sceptile, go. Pikachu, with me. While the front line was blinded, Ash and his two fastest Pokémon skirted around the edge of the conflict. Sceptile moved like a phantom through the thick ferns, while Ash and Pikachu used the rock formations for cover. They were heading for the support line. While they're distracted, May continued her performance, her voice a conductor's call, Beautifly, Silver Wind on the Magnezones. Wartortle, Bubble Beam, widespread. Don't aim, just fill the air. Beautifly soared high, its wings beating rapidly, unleashing a shimmering storm of razor-sharp particles that glittered in the cavern's light. The silver wind wasn't aimed at doing damage, but at disruption. The cloud of particles interfered with the Magnezone's magnetic fields, causing their levitation to flicker and their aim to waver. At the same time, Wartortle spun, spraying a massive, dense cloud of iridescent bubbles into the air. They weren't powerful, but there were thousands of them, catching the light, distorting vision, and turning the battlefield into a confusing, beautiful mess. It was a contest strategy. Dazzle, disorient, control the stage. Valerius's soldiers, trained for straightforward combat, were completely unprepared for this level of artistic, chaotic warfare. What is she doing? Kale, who was directing a fire team, yelled in frustration. This is chaos. No, Valerius said, his voice a low growl of dawning respect as he watched May conduct her Pokémon like an orchestra. This is strategy. Ash and his team burst from the jungle directly into the Aegis support line. The soldiers and their Bronzong, distracted by the beautiful chaos in front of them, were taken completely by surprise. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Chain it. Ash commanded, his voice ringing with power now that he was out of the main disruption field. Pikachu unleashed a massive bolt of lightning that struck the nearest Bronzong. The electricity leaped to the next, and the next, arcing between the metallic Pokémon in a devastating chain reaction. They clattered to the ground, incapacitated. Sceptile was a whirlwind of green, his leaf blades flashing. He wasn't aiming for the soldiers, but for their equipment. With surgical precision, he sliced through the sonic emitters, and the mind-numbing whine that had plagued Ash cut out abruptly. Ash's senses came roaring back to life. The vibrant hum of the hearth, the strong, clear presence of his Pokémon, the connection to May, it all flooded back in, and he felt a surge of power. The tide of the battle had turned in less than a minute. May's brilliant, unconventional strategy had dismantled the Aegis siege from the inside out. Valerius watched his perfectly orchestrated operation crumble into disarray. His soldiers were disoriented, his front line stalled, his support neutralized. He looked at May, who stood calm and poised amidst the chaos she had unleashed, then at Ash, who was now systematically disabling his remaining forces with a terrifying, controlled power. He had made a critical error. He had analyzed Ash Ketchum, the powerhouse. He had completely overlooked May, the artist. He saw them as a primary threat and a non-combatant. He failed to see them as a team. All units, fall back. Reform at the tunnel entrance. Valerius commanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. He would not be defeated this easily. He activated a control on his wrist gauntlet. Phase 2. Agitate the asset. Deep beneath the cavern floor, a new series of vibrations began. Low-frequency sonic pulses, designed not to disrupt aura, but to irritate. The deep, rumbling growl from the heart of the mountain returned, this time filled with an angry, agonized pain. The water in the central lake began to churn. A massive vortex formed, and from its center, a huge, donut-shaped creature with a body of red and black rock erupted, steam venting from the pipes on its back. It was Volcanian. Its eyes glowed with a furious red light. The Aegis pulses were driving it into a rage. They're trying to make it go berserk. Ash yelled, realizing their plan. They wanted to destroy the cavern, and us with it. Volcanian let out a world-shaking roar and unleashed a devastating scald attack, a massive wave of boiling water that shot towards the retreating Aegis. Soldiers. Valerius was prepared. A colossal Bastiodon, his personal Pokémon, materialized in front of him, its massive shield face taking the full brunt of the attack with a deafening hiss of steam. But the berserk Volcanian wasn't just aiming for them. It turned its furious gaze on Ash and May. It saw only threats in its home. It opened its back-mounted cannons and prepared to unleash a catastrophic steam eruption. We have to calm it down. May cried. There's no time. Ash countered. He had to make a split-second decision. To fight the enraged mythical, or to face the true architect of the chaos. He chose the latter. May. You and your team, calm Volcanian. Use your appeals. Show it we're not the enemy. I'm ending this. He locked eyes with Valerius across the chaotic cavern. The commander stood behind his Bastiodon, a look of cold triumph on his face. This was his endgame, to let the mythical Pokémon solve his problem for him. Ash's expression was pure, focused intensity. Pikachu, Sceptile, with me. He charged, not at Volcanian, but straight at Valerius. May didn't hesitate. She trusted him completely. She turned to her Pokémon, her face set with determination. All right, team. This is the most important performance of our lives. We need to show it our hearts. Wartortle, sing. Beautifly, sweet scent. Blaziken, be ready. As Ash sprinted across the cavern floor, dodging jets of steam and enraged swipes from the Volcanian, May began her own battle. Wartortle began to sing, a soft, gentle melody that struggled to be heard over the chaos. Beautifly released a fine, calming mist. It was a battle of empathy against mindless rage. Ash closed the distance to Valerius in seconds. This ends now, Valerius. Indeed, it does, the commander replied calmly, as his Bastiodon braced for impact. Sceptile, frenzy plant. Ash roared. Sceptile slammed its hands into the ground. Massive, thorny vines, powered by the life force of the hearth itself, erupted from the cavern floor. They didn't attack Bastiodon. They shot up and around it, forming a temporary, living cage that trapped the massive Pokémon, pinning its legs. Valerius was exposed. Pikachu, 10 million volt thunderbolt. It was not a command Ash gave lightly. It was the culmination of their bond, a Z-move without a Z-ring, powered by their shared will. A rainbow of energies swirled around Pikachu as he leaped into the air, a beacon of overwhelming power. Valerius's eyes widened for the first time in genuine shock. The energy reading was off the scale. This was a power that shouldn't be possible. The colossal bolt of multicolored lightning shot downwards, not at Valerius, but at the ground directly in front of him. The impact was apocalyptic. The cavern shook, and a trench was gouged in the stone floor. The shockwave alone, a blast of pure kinetic force and ozone, slammed into Valerius, throwing him backwards like a ragdoll. He crashed into the wall of the newly bored tunnel and slumped to the ground, his armor sparking, his systems fried. He was unconscious. The Aegis soldiers stared, mouths agape. Their invincible commander, defeated in a single, overwhelming display of power. At the same time, May's efforts were bearing fruit. Vulcanian, battered by the gentle song and calming aroma, and seeing that Ash's attack wasn't aimed at it, began to slow its rampage. Its red eyes flickered, the mindless rage giving way to a pained confusion. Ash walked calmly past the trapped Bastiodon and the unconscious commander. He faced the remaining Aegis soldiers, who were frozen in shock and fear. "Your commander is beaten," Ash said, his voice echoing in the suddenly quieter cavern. "Your mission has failed. The Vulcanian is calming down. Take him, and go. Don't come back." Kale, who had watched the entire exchange in stunned disbelief, was the first to react. He looked at Ash, at the sheer, terrifying power he wielded, and then at the control he showed in using it. He hadn't killed the commander. He hadn't even seriously injured him. He had simply removed him from the board. He had demonstrated his superiority in a way that was absolute and undeniable. "You heard him," Kale ordered his troops, his voice heavy with a new, profound uncertainty. "Retrieve the commander. We're pulling out." As the Aegis soldiers scrambled to obey, Ash turned his back on them and walked towards May. She was standing by the edge of the lake, her hand outstretched towards the now quiet Vulcanian. The massive Pokémon was watching her, its intelligent eyes no longer filled with rage, but with a wary curiosity. It gave a low, questioning rumble. Ash came to stand beside May. He didn't look at the retreating soldiers. He looked at the mythical Pokémon they had saved. Then he looked at May, her face illuminated by the hearth's glow, her expression one of fierce compassion. He had faced down the Aegis Order's finest and won. But seeing her there, calming a rampaging god with a song, he knew, without a single doubt, who the truly powerful one was. The seed of doubt he had planted in Kale's mind had begun to sprout. But a much more significant seed had been planted in Valerius's unconscious mind, the realization that there were forces in this world that could not be caged, and that true power was not the ability to control, but the strength to connect. Chapter 6, The Path to the Crown Shrine. The retreat of the Aegis Order was as swift and efficient as their attack. They collected their unconscious commander and their disabled equipment, their movements lacking their earlier arrogance, replaced by a sullen, fearful respect. Kale cast one last, long, unreadable look at Ash before disappearing into the blackness of the tunnel they had created. Then, with a low hum, a heavy blast door of reinforced steel descended, sealing the tunnel and plunging the hearth back into its sacred, self-contained silence. The only sounds were the gentle roar of the waterfalls and the heavy, steamy breathing of the Vulcanian. The massive Pokémon had fully calmed, its rage replaced by an ancient, weary intelligence. It watched Ash and May with its deep, ruby-red eyes, no longer seeing them as threats, but as the strange, powerful beings who had both defended its home and soothed its pain. May kept her hand outstretched, her posture relaxed and non-threatening. "It's okay," she murmured, her voice soft and hypnotic. "You're safe now. No one will hurt you." Vulcanian gave a low, affirmative rumble. It dipped its massive head in a gesture of acknowledgement, a silent thank you, before slowly sinking back into the depths of the geothermal lake. The water swirled and then grew still, leaving no trace of the mythical guardian save for the lingering scent of sulfur and steam. The moment the great Pokémon was gone, the last of May's strength seemed to leave her. She swayed on her feet, her face pale. Ash was there in an instant, his arm wrapping around her waist, supporting her. "Easy," he said, his voice a low, concerned rumble. "You were incredible." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "That was more terrifying than the ice wraiths," she admitted, her voice shaky. "It's anger," it was so pure. So absolute. But you reached it, Ash said, his admiration for her boundless. You calmed a berserker god with a song. Valerius had all the technology in the world, and all he could do was make it angrier. You connected with it. He led her back to their small camp on the mossy bank, where their Pokémon were gathering, exhausted but victorious. Pikachu scampered up to his shoulder, nuzzling his cheek, while Blaziken moved to May's side, its concern for its partner palpable. We won, she whispered, as if trying to convince herself. We did, Ash confirmed. And we have a new problem. He gestured to the back of the cavern with his head. Elian had said the tunnels from the hearth led to the base of the crown shrine. But the Aegis Order's schematics had shown those same tunnels, marked with the symbol for demolition charges. I don't think Valerius would leave us an open escape route. A grim understanding passed between them. Their hard-won sanctuary was now a potential tomb. Leaving May to rest with Blaziken and Pikachu, Ash took Sceptile to investigate. His fears were confirmed. The tunnel entrance at the far end of the cavern was gone, collapsed in a heap of rubble and twisted rock, the demolition charges clearly having been triggered remotely as Aegis retreated. He returned to the camp, his expression grim. They sealed the exit. May looked from the collapsed tunnel to the new, steel blast door sealed one. So we're trapped. Ash's gaze was fixed on the Aegis's new entrance. They built a door, he said, a dangerous glint in his eye. They didn't think we'd be able to open it. He walked over to the massive steel barrier, pressing his palm against its cold, unyielding surface. Valerius thinks in terms of technology and force. He doesn't understand that there are other kinds of keys. He closed his eyes, his aura flaring to life, his senses now clear and sharp. He wasn't looking for a lock or a control panel. He was searching for a flaw, a weakness in the metal's molecular structure, a stressed weld, a point of resonance. He found it near the massive hinges. Pikachu, he said, his voice calm. I need a very specific frequency. A super high-pitched electric pulse. Aim for the top hinge. Don't try to break it. Just make it vibrate. Pikachu tilted his head, his sharp intelligence grasping the strange request. He leaped onto a nearby rock for a better angle, his cheek sparking not with raw power, but with a fine-tuned, controlled energy. He let out a piercing, high-frequency hum of electricity, a focused beam of sonic energy that struck the hinge. At the same time, Ash commanded, Sceptile. Low kick on the opposite corner. As hard as you can. Sceptile's leg became a blur, delivering a powerful, precise kick to the bottom corner of the door. The combination of the vibrating, weakened hinge and the sudden, jarring impact on the opposite diagonal created a resonance cascade. With a deafening groan of tortured metal, the blast door's locking mechanism shattered. The massive steel slab tilted, scraping against the stone, and then crashed outwards into the tunnel, opening a path. May just stared, shaking her head in disbelief. You just picked the lock on a military blast door, with a vibration and a kick. Everything has a breaking point, Ash said simply, peering into the dark, man-made tunnel. Let's go. Silas has given us enough time. The journey through the Aegis tunnel was a strange one. It was a sterile, metal and rock corridor, a stark contrast to the living, breathing paths they had been traveling. They moved with caution, but the base was clearly abandoned in haste. They were climbing, heading back up towards the surface, towards the cold. After what felt like an hour, they saw it, a pale, gray light at the end of the tunnel. The air grew bitingly cold again. They emerged from a cleverly hidden cave mouth onto a high, wind-scoured ridge. They were significantly higher up the mountain than before, and the view was both breathtaking and terrifying. The crown shrine, a jagged peak of black ice and rock that clawed at the sky, was now visible in its entirety. It was the epicenter of a maelstrom. A perpetual, localized blizzard swirled around its summit, a vortex of dark cloud and spectral, white snow. It wasn't a storm anymore, it was a fortress wall, a manifestation of Silas's will. And at the very top of the peak, a faint, cold blue light pulsed like a dying star. That was the heart. So that's it, May breathed, pulling her jacket tighter. The final stage. We can't climb into that, Ash stated, his aura recoiling from the sheer concentration of sorrowful, cold energy. It would tear us apart. He scanned the base of the peak, remembering the old lorekeeper's map. The path Elian showed us, the one that bypasses the worst of it, it should start somewhere around here. He led them along the ridge, moving parallel to the shrine's base. The snow here was different. It was laced with the same black, crystalline ice that had pulsed in the cave, the physical residue of Silas's power. The air hummed with it, and the whispering began again, no longer a direct intrusion, but a constant, faint murmur on the edge of hearing. Peace, rest, why struggle? Don't listen to it, Ash said, his voice a firm anchor in the growing unease. It's just noise. He found the path not with his eyes, but with his aura. It wasn't a path of stone, but a path of lesser despair. A thin, winding trail where Silas's influence was weakest, like a seam in his blanket of sorrow. It led them up a narrow, treacherous goat track that hugged the side of the mountain, a precarious route with a sheer drop on one side and the swirling wall of the storm on the other. As they began their ascent, the nature of the assault changed. Silas, sensing their direct approach and their unyielding bond, escalated his tactics. The whispers grew louder, more personal. The attack was no longer a general broadcast of despair, but a targeted, psychological strike. A sudden, violent gust of wind slammed into May, nearly throwing her from the narrow path. She cried out, catching herself at the last second. But it wasn't the wind that terrified her. In its howl, she heard the voice of her old rival, Drew, his tone dripping with condescending disdain from a contest she had lost years ago. You're all style and no substance, May. You'll never have what it takes. She stumbled, her face paling. The memory was so vivid, so real. Drew, she whispered, confused. It's not real, May. Ash yelled, grabbing her arm, his grip firm and grounding. It's an illusion. It's Silas, using your memories against you. But then it was his turn. The world around him shimmered, and for a heart-stopping moment, he wasn't on a mountain. He was back in the stadium in Winden, the roar of the crowd deafening. Leon stood before him, his Charizard immense and powerful. He saw his own Pikachu, battered and struggling to stand. He felt the crushing, absolute weight of his near defeat, the moment he thought he was going to lose everything he'd fought for. The self-doubt, the fear of failure, it washed over him with the force of a tidal wave. I'm not strong enough, he heard himself mutter, his steps faltering. Ash. May's voice cut through the illusion, sharp and clear. She was gripping his hand, her expression fierce and determined. Look at me. It's a lie. You won. You're the world monarch. Don't let him twist it. Her voice was the anchor. He blinked, and the stadium vanished, replaced by the snow and rock of the mountain path. The memory's power faded, leaving only a sour residue of fear. He looked at May, at the unshakable belief in her eyes, and he found his footing again. He's getting stronger, Ash gritted out, his respect for Silas's power growing even as his resolve to defeat him hardened. He's not just broadcasting despair anymore. He's weaving it into our past. They pushed on, their hands now clasped together, a physical link against the psychological storm. They became each other's reality, each other's truth, in a world of lies. When Ash was assaulted by a vision of all the Pokémon he'd had to leave behind, their faces accusing, May was there to whisper, you gave them a choice. You gave them a better life. They love you. When May was paralyzed by the memory of her crushing defeat at the Kanto Grand Festival, the sight of her ribbons shattering, Ash was there, his voice a firm bulwark. That loss made you stronger. It taught you. It led you here. It wasn't an ending. They climbed through a gauntlet of their own worst moments, their deepest fears and insecurities, weaponized against them. But each time one of them stumbled, the other was there to hold them up. Their bond, their shared history, which Silas was trying to use as a weapon, became their greatest shield. They knew each other's pain, and so they knew how to heal it. Their love, forged in the hearth and now tested in this crucible of despair, was a defiant flame of warmth against the encroaching cold. After what felt like an eternity, the narrow path widened, opening onto a circular, windswept plateau just below the main storm vortex. The howling of the wind was deafening here. The ground was made not of snow, but of slick, black ice. And in the center of the plateau, blocking their path to the final ascent, stood a figure. It was one of the 3 legendary birds of Galar, but it was horrifyingly twisted. The elegant, psychic Articuno, normally a creature of cool grace, was now a vessel of pure, silent despair. Its feathers were the color of a dead winter sky. Its eyes, usually sharp and intelligent, were vacant, glowing with the same cold, blue light as the heart on the peak. A psychic crown of jagged, black ice floated above its head, a clear mark of Silas's absolute control. The corrupted Articuno didn't cry out. It simply raised its wings, and a wave of pure psychic energy, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, washed over them. It wasn't an illusion. It was a direct attack, a wave of amplified misery that threatened to snuff out their wills completely. Ash grunted, his aura flaring to form a shield, but it buckled under the sheer force of the emotion. He felt his hope draining away, replaced by a gray, listless apathy. What's the point? It's easier to just stop. No. May's voice was a clarion call. She stood firm, her eyes blazing with a defiant fire. She was a performer, an artist who dealt in emotion. She would not be defeated by it. Blaziken. Let's show it what real passion looks like. Blaziken leaped forward, landing on the black ice, its own inner fire so hot that the ice sizzled and steamed around its feet. It let out a roar of pure, unadulterated fighting spirit, a sound of life and passion in this dead place. The battle began. It was a clash of fundamental opposites. The corrupted Articuno fought with a cold, silent, tactical precision, unleashing psychic blades and freezing beams of energy that were imbued with despair. To be hit by them wasn't just to be frozen, but to have your very desire to fight extinguished. But Ash and May fought back with a perfect, seamless synergy. Sceptile, use the shadows. Pikachu, agility. Ash commanded, his voice clear and strong again, drawing strength from May's defiance. Sceptile melted into the shifting shadows at the edge of the plateau, a phantom threat, while Pikachu became a blur of yellow, his speed making him an impossible target for the Articuno's psychic attacks. Blaziken, sky uppercut. May directed. Show it the fire that reaches for the heavens. Blaziken shot upwards, its fist a comet of flame, aiming for the airborne Articuno. The legendary bird swerved, dodging the main blow, but the sheer heat of the attack caused its psychic concentration to waver. Now, Ash. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Sceptile, Leaf Storm. A bolt of brilliant, life-affirming lightning and a vortex of sharp, vibrant green leaves slammed into the Articuno from 2 different directions. The creature shrieked, a soundless cry of pain that echoed in their minds. It was a sound of frustration, not of a living thing, but of a perfect machine being disrupted. The Articuno focused its cold fury on Blaziken, the most immediate, most vibrant threat. It unleashed a powerful freezing glare, twin beams of psychic energy shooting from its eyes. Blaziken, protect yourself. May cried. But something else moved. Ash's Lucario, released from his ball in a flash of light, appeared in front of Blaziken. It thrust its hands forward, a shimmering shield of blue aura flaring to life, meeting the freezing glare head-on. The 2 forces clashed, a battle of cold despair versus focused will. Lucario grunted, its paws trembling, but it held the line, protecting its comrade. The bond between Ash and May, and between their Pokémon, was a web of interlocking support. When one was threatened, another was there to defend. They were a single, multifaceted fighting unit. It's being controlled, Ash realized, his aura connecting with Lucario's. Through his Pokémon, he could feel the strings of Silas's will attached to the Articuno. The crown. The crown of ice is the focal point. Then let's break it. May declared, her eyes flashing. Let's give them a finale they'll never forget. The move we practiced in the hearth. Ash grinned. It was a risky, all-or-nothing combination they had devised while their Pokémon were recovering, a fusion of his power and her artistry. Lucario, hold it steady. Ash commanded. Pikachu, on my shoulder. Blaziken, get ready. Lucario roared, pouring more aura into its shield, locking the Articuno in a beam struggle. Pikachu scrambled onto Ash's shoulder, his body thrumming with power. Blaziken stood beside May, its fists clenched, its body glowing with contained fire. May. Now. Blaziken. Flare Blitz. Pikachu. Volt Tackle. At the exact same instant, the two Pokémon charged. Blaziken became a living missile of spiraling fire. Pikachu launched from Ash's shoulder, a thunderbolt of pure gold. They weren't heading for the Articuno. They were heading for each other. They collided in mid-air, directly in front of the struggling Lucario. But it wasn't a collision. It was a fusion. In a breathtaking display of control, the fire and the lightning merged. They wrapped around each other, forming a spinning, spiraling vortex of incandescent, electric flame, a golden and orange drill of unimaginable power. It was a move that defied type matchups, a perfect synthesis of their passion and energy. A volt-flare combination. Go! Ash and May yelled in perfect unison. The spiraling drill of fire and lightning, guided by their combined will, slammed through Lucario's waning shield and struck the corrupted Articuno dead center. The impact was silent, but the release of energy was blinding. The attack didn't just hit the Articuno, it hit the very core of Silas's control. The black ice crown above the legendary bird's head spiderwebbed with cracks of golden light, and then, with a psychic scream that tore through the mountain, it shattered into a million pieces. The cold blue light in the Articuno's eyes vanished, replaced by its natural, intelligent violet. The dead sky feathers regained their vibrant, lavender hue. The creature shook its head as if waking from a long nightmare, let out a confused but grateful cry, and then, with a powerful flap of its wings, it soared up into the storm and vanished. It was over. The path to the final ascent was clear. Lucario, Pikachu, and Blaziken stood panting, their energy spent but their spirits soaring. Ash and May rushed to them, praising them. Their hands meeting over Blaziken's shoulder. They looked at each other, their faces flushed with victory and adrenaline, a shared, triumphant grin on their faces. They had faced the guardian of the path and won. They had turned Silas's psychological warfare back on itself and proven that their bond was stronger than his despair. They stood together on the edge of the plateau, looking up at the final, treacherous climb to the summit. The storm still raged, a vortex of sorrow and cold. But it no longer seemed invincible. They had found the path. They had passed the test. And they were ready to face the heart of the winter, together. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.